the racism, the naked racism and misogyny, hatred of women that this administration displays at every opportunity, combined with their absolute incompetence and their unwillingness to appropriately fund our federal government, is simply mind-boggling. I just watched a press conference where J.D. Vance came out and said that qualified white people wanted to be air traffic controllers. We got turned away because of the color of their skin. And Donald Trump went off on a long rant about DEI. I'm just astonished. Trump just spent 15, 20 minutes in front of the cameras, and as did, and Pete Hegseth was there briefly. Apparently his hangover isn't so bad. I was wondering last night, this is a DOD helicopter. Where the hell is Pete Hegseth? He was probably too drunk to hold a press conference. But, he looked like he cleaned himself up this morning. But anyhow, they're all out there going, it's all DEI, it's all DEI, it's all because they're hiring black people and women instead of white men. This is beyond disgusting. And then one of the reporters gets up and says, throughout the 4 years of your last administration, that let's hire DEI thing is on the FAA website. Why didn't you change it? I did change it. I got rid of them. And then Biden put those black people back in there. No. He's like, of course he's lying through his teeth, but there will be nothing. There will never be a tragedy that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance will not figure out a way to blame on black people or women. Just like 21 years ago when I started this program, maybe it's 22 years now, I said, if anybody can find any single piece of legislation, a major piece of legislation, that benefits average working people more than billionaires, that was written by Republicans, introduced by Republicans, passed by a majority of Republicans in the House and Senate, and signed into law by a Republican president, I'll give you a prize. I'll give you any one of my books you want autographed by me. Not a big prize, but yeah, there's been a couple of small things like, the do not call list. But basically, nobody's won in terms of major legislation, nobody has won. And so I think I can also make a prediction here that pretty much any disaster, Donald Trump is going to figure out a way to either blame on a Democrat, like he blamed the fires on Gavin Newsom in California, or on black people or women. It's frankly shocking, particularly given that the Department of, first of all, Trump fired on January 21st, he fired all of the members of the Aviation Security Advisory Committee, the safety board for the FAA. This was created after the Lockerbie bombing back in 1988. Excuse me. It was mandated by Congress. Now, he didn't dissolve the board because you can't do that because Congress mandated it, but what he did was he fired all its members, so it just functionally doesn't work. So there's no safety board right now. And then, he comes out and he heard things. We got 67 people dead, and he's posting on Truth Social, why didn't the control tower tell the helicopter what to do instead of asking if they saw the plane? This is a bad situation. It looks like it should have been prevented. Not good. Well, clearly it's a bad situation. And there's all kinds of speculation, and I think, a lot of this speculation is irresponsible. There are a few things we do know. The helicopter pilots, the guy flying the helicopter is apparently wearing night vision goggles. Now, I've seen several reports to that effect. Might not be the case. We won't know until they find the bodies and whatnot, presumably. But And when you're wearing, I've worn night vision goggles. When you do that, you lose your peripheral vision. You can't see basically what's going on around you. That might have had something to do with it. It might have been that the helicopter pilot misidentified the aircraft. They were looking at a different aircraft, thinking that that was the one they were warned about. But I've been a pilot for over 50 years, and just little planes. But, I know how to fly an airplane, and I know what the rules are. And I've interacted with air traffic control more times than I can remember. And when they say, do you have that plane, do you have that aircraft, visual confirmation, and you say yes, they take your word for it. They have no choice. Also, this is from July of last year. Now, keep in mind, Biden was president, but Republicans controlled the House and Senate, or at least controlled the House. And major aviation groups and unions urged Congress to address persistent shortfalls in funding for the FAA after a series of reports raised alarm about aging air traffic control facilities. Airlines for America, the Aerospace Industries Association, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Airline Pilots Association, and others warned of a failure to address funding needs that were negatively affecting the traveling public and other civil and military users of the system. In March, President Joe Biden proposed spending $8 billion over the next 5 years, beginning with $1 billion in 2025, to replace or modernize more than 20 aging air traffic control facilities and 377 critical radar systems. Republicans in the House of Representatives and the Senate refused to pass this legislation. The report said the FAA's communication system has been outdated for years. The agency can no longer get spare parts for many systems. Separately, the FAA wants funding from Congress to hire another 2,000 air traffic controllers. Last month, the FAA again extended cuts to minimum flight requirements at congested New York City airports through October of this year, 2025, citing staffing shortages. Did Congress do anything, the Republican-controlled Congress, do anything about Joe Biden's request? No. No, of course not. Why wouldn't the GOP increase funding to the FAA? Well, because it's paid for with taxes from billionaires, and billionaires don't want to pay their damn taxes, so they're trying to gut the federal government. I mean, it's really that simple. And Democrats need to be repeating this over and over and over again. Donald Trump comes out and says, oh, this is the fault of black people. It's all about diversity, equity, and inclusion. DEI. What? Inclusion, right? I'm not remembering what I stands for, but whatever. Yeah, inclusion. That's what I thought. And completely ignores Republican opposition to properly funding the FAA for years. I'm just astonished, absolutely astonished, that Trump would use the occasion of the tragic death of 67 people, apparent pilot error on the part of the helicopter, to blame this on black people and women. I watched this press conference this morning with my mouth open. I can't believe he's saying this. And then J.D. Vance comes up to the podium, up to the lectern, and says, words to the effect of, I don't have the exact quote, but I heard it. Words to the effect of, there were white people who were qualified to be air traffic controllers, but they were not hired because they had to hire some black people instead. Actually, I think the phrase he used was they were turned away because of the color of their skin. Well, does that mean that the black people who were hired were not qualified? Of course not. The FAA doesn't hire unqualified people just because of the color of their skin or their gender. This is just, and how do you even know that less qualified, he's implying less qualified people were hired. How do you even know that? The racism, the naked racism and misogyny, hatred of women that this administration displays at every opportunity, combined with their absolute incompetence and their unwillingness to appropriately fund our federal government, is simply mind-boggling.
We say fight back! In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
Our book today is The End of the Myth, From the Frontier to the Border Wall in the Mind of America by Greg Grandin. And this is from Chapter 1, titled All That Space. The British colonies in North America were conceived in expansion. America was an aspiration, an errand, and an obligation born out of violent Christian schism and Europe's interminable religious and imperial conflicts. Depending on the intricacies of their particular interpretations of Revelation, the Protestants who settled New England might have understood flight across the Atlantic as a way of escaping European war, or they might have seen migration as a chance to open a new front and win those wars on a new soil. Here in the 1600s, in the eschatological nebula of the New World, was the first paradoxical image of America as simultaneously pristine and despoiled, empty and at the same time filled with primitives begging for deliverance, subordinated to Catholic Spain, which had conquered its part of the Americas a century earlier and stood as the great obstacle to Reformation England's rise as a world power. All yell and cry with one voice, Libertia, Libertia, Richard Hakluyt, a clergyman and court minister, wrote in the late 1500s, hoping to convince investors and his queen to establish an American colony. As Puritan society frayed under the harsh conditions of settler life, the frontier threatened and beckoned, filled with witches, and they were witchy, inviting hither. The forest was the place where the community could be redeemed and given new purpose, a chance to once again start anew, or it could be a place of more sorrows, wilderness sorrows, as two early Puritan patriarchs described the hardships that awaited those who ventured into uncharted territory, where whatever solidarity existed would be smashed into atoms as settlers scattered to escape the rule of the clergy. People are ready to run wild into the woods again and to be as heathenish as ever, warned Increase Mather. Expansions could be, often in the same sermon, held up as the cause of and the solution to the difficulties of establishing Christian communities. Either way, Native Americans had to get out of the way. They could die. They waste, they molder away, they disappear, said one Puritan chronicler of indigenous people who had succumbed to European pestilence years before the arrival of the Mayflower in 1620, thus clearing the earth for the establishment of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. God made way for his people by removing the heathen and planting them in the ground, said another observer. They could be murdered. The holy terror unleashed by the Puritans was, according to the historian Bernard Bailyn, driven by fears of what could happen to civilized people in an unimaginable wilderness and fears of racial conflicts in which God's children were fated to struggle with pitiless agents of Satan, pagan antichrists swarming in the world around them. Survivors could be enslaved. The first patent granted in colonial America in 1626 was to a Virginia merchant and planter, William Claiborne, for inventing a device that would not just restrain Indians, but also make them work. Claiborne was given an Indian to experiment on for the trial of his invention. Colonial records do not say what this innovation might have been, only noting that it was not successful. Or they could be pushed further and further west. The prodigious and relentless population, complained New Orleans Spanish governor in 1794, progressively drives the Indian nations before them and upon us, seeking to possess for itself this vast continent which the Indians occupy between the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Appalachian Mountains. More than a century and a half later, writing in the early 1950s, the Mexican author and diplomat Octavio Paz made much the same point. America was, he writes, if anything, geography, pure space, open to human action. Since it lacked historical substance, ancient social classes, established institutions, religions, and hereditary laws, reality presented no obstacles other than natural ones. Men struggled not against history, but against nature. And wherever there was an historical obstacle, indigenous societies say, it was simply erased from history, reduced to a mere natural fact and dispensed with accordingly. Evil is outside, part of the natural world, like Indians, rivers, mountains, and other obstacles that must be domesticated or destroyed. End of quote. The American Revolution is a permanent revolution, Paz went on, a nonstop expulsion of, quote, all elements foreign to the American essence, and a constant invention of itself. And anything that stands in the way of that invention, anything that is in any way irreducible or inassimilable to perpetual creation, be it Native Americans, Spanish America, or history itself, quote, is not American. Quote, in other places, the future is one of man's attributes because we are men. We have a future. In Saxon America, the process is inverted and the future determines the man. We are men because we are the future, and everything that has no future is not a man. End of quote. The United States, Paz said, offers no room for contradictions, ambiguity, or conflict. The nation flies forward swiftly as if weightless across the land. Trying to stop North Americans moving west, Stephen Austin, the founder of Texas, said over a century earlier, was like trying to stop the Mississippi with a dam of straw. The drive west waxed and waned and burst forward with great passion during key moments. The book, The Edge of the Myth, by Greg Grandin.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, top of the Wednesday to you, the middle of the week. It is our day for Middays with Mark. We'll be with Congressman Pocan in just a second. Also in the second hour of our program, my daily take today, the billionaire coup is almost complete and no one so far has stopped it. Can we return to democracy? Also, after being sworn in 2 weeks ago, Trump is ready to invade and do ethnic cleansing in Gaza. This is now the fifth country he's talked about invading, right? In the third hour of our, also more news. Are some Democrats still supporting Trump's picks? Yes. Is Trump's science purging women? Yes. Are white nationalists being welcomed into our government? Yes. Wild stuff. In our third hour, federal health workers are expressing fear and alarm after a website called DEI Watch List published the photos, names, and public information of federal workers. Who's feeding them that information? And the CIA is offering buyouts to the entire workforce. What could possibly go wrong? It's just absolutely breathtaking. But for our first hour, our entire first hour, Congressman Mark Pocan is with us, the Chair Emeritus of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He's the co-founder and co-chair of the Labor Caucus, chair of the Congressional Equality Caucus. Pocan.house.gov is his website. You can find him over on Blue Sky at pocan.house.gov. And Congressman, welcome back to the program. And I have a couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
As you can imagine. First off, we see that Elon Musk is deconstructing the government, and there's two ways to look at this. One is, this is part of the attack on government that Ronald Reagan started, or that David Koch arguably started in 1980, when he called for shutting down all government agencies, basically, except for the police agencies and the military and the judiciary. But the Department of Defense, USAID was investigating Starlink, the Inspector General. And let's start off. SpaceX, the Inspector General for Department of Defense, investigating SpaceX. He gets canned. Starlink is being investigated by USAID. That gets shut down. The Inspectors General for Justice, Transportation, and Securities and Exchange, all investigating Tesla. They get shut down. IG for Transportation and Neuralink, they get shut down. Securities and Exchange Commission looking into X, actually, and the Federal Trade Commission. And I don't know if their inspectors general got shut down or not, but I believe so. Doge is also, or Dodge or whatever, has also taken control of the Office of Personnel Management. And so the wild thing about that is that if they control the Treasury funds and the tax refunds, then they can access tax returns. They can. This is what one of our friends writes. They can open competitors' schedules and study any corporate expenditures and strategies that interest Musk. They can open their neighbors, their in-laws, their professors, and their ex-girlfriend's tax returns. They can open the return of anyone who insults them on the news or social media. They can wreak havoc on tax refunds, deductions, Social Security payments, or any other federally funded transaction with the press of a button. Wipe out all funding for an organization like USAID. I mean, this seems to me like a coup. This without the traditional, like Pinochet, where the guys show up with guns and half tracks. This instead was geeks with hard drives. But this sure looks to me like a coup. What say you?
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, Elon Musk should be fired, right? We've got to do everything we can, I think, as
well. He was never hired, was he?
Well, he's technically a special government employee, right? But that's part of the question. Is he's gotten over $20 billion in federal contracts for his various businesses, and some undisclosed for Starlink, Skylink, including for actions with Ukraine. So more than $20 billion of contracts. And I, as a member of Congress, can't have a federal contract. Almost every federal employee can't have a federal contract, especially if it has anything to do with their area that they work in the federal government. And yet this guy is one of the biggest beneficiaries of welfare from the government through government contracts. And now he has access to what programs and what funding is going to occur.
And his competitors.
And his competitors. So I introduced a bill today called the Eliminating the Looting of Our Nation by Mitigating Unethical State Kleptocracy Act, which, to be a little more simple, it's the Elon Musk Act, that specifically would take away his federal contracts if he's going to be a special government employee, because you can't be both. He's grifting the nation by redirecting funds. And in this way, think about it. Any agency, you want to get on good side, find a contract for one of Elon Musk's businesses, right? Like, everything about this is filthy. It's dirty. You talk about draining the swamp. I mean, this is, building a mountain of swamp in Washington, even more so with what Elon Musk is doing. So we've got to stop him and, of course, Donald Trump, who he's purchased fully and completely from doing this stuff. But we are somewhat limited as members of Congress because we don't have the House and the Senate. The Senate has a few rules where they can slow some things down, but what we can do is a couple-fold. One, the groups that are doing litigation right now, it's really, really important. And we need to support those groups that are doing litigation, stopping bills. And there are now litigation trackers you can get on your phone and then keep up with all the litigation. But a lot of groups are doing a lot of good. Two, communication. We have to talk about exposing the stuff you just said, the bill I put out there to talk about these federal contracts that he gets, which again shows the impropriety of what he's doing. And then make sure that people communicate that message, because at some point they clearly are overreaching, and at some point even the people who drink the most Kool-Aid are going to be affected or get pissed off, and that's what we've got to get them to. But right now we just need a couple Republicans in the House to do the right thing, but that means we need people pressure from around the country to put that pressure on them. So we're going to share information. We need people to help us get that out. We need to support the litigation, and where we can do things legislatively, we're going to try to. But my guess is more of the actions are going to be between litigation and communication, people power, us working inside and outside to fight for really the soul of our country.
Yeah, I should qualify my statements by saying that we don't know to what extent Musk was involved in the decisions to get rid of inspectors general in various agencies. But this, the headline over at Drudge right now, that USAID was investigating one of Musk's companies. It's wild. What beyond this? What are Democrats doing? I've been pitching this idea for some time, and Timothy Snyder as well. I've been on this for 2 decades now. that Democrats need to create a shadow government. I was calling for this during the Bush administration, the George W. Bush administration, that Democrats should designate somebody to be the shadow Secretary of Transportation, the shadow Secretary of State, the shadow Secretary of the Treasury, who could call press conferences, who could speak on essentially behalf, the sense of the party. Is the problem that the party is just so disorganized? Is Ken Martin going to bring some order to all this? Or is it just going to be more happy talk and Chuck Schumer reading droning, boring speeches from the floor of the Senate?
Yeah, I mean, the fact is we don't have a figurehead for the Democratic Party right now. We don't have a president. We don't have a vice president. We've got governors. We've got senators. You've got members of Congress. You have others. But there's no one person. And, let's hope the DNC can do something different than they have for my entire lifetime, which bluntly, they haven't been that relevant to me because they haven't done that role. I hope that maybe they can do that. But honestly, right now, we're all trying to figure out what we can do best while they're flooding the zone with attacks. I mean, from, as you mentioned, the number of countries he wants to invade, most recently his comments about Gaza and the U.S. taking over. The problem is we got to figure out what's the 20 or 25% of what he says that's real and make sure we focus on that. We know that the big prize they want is the reconciliation bill, a tax break for the wealthiest, for Elon Musk, for Jeff Bezos, for Mark Zuckerberg. And just to extend what they already did for the wealthiest in the last Trump administration, that's $4 trillion over 10 years. So that's why they won't raise revenue. They probably can't go into debt like last time because there's enough Republicans that might not go along with that. So they have to cut programs. And that's why Elon Musk is going around doing what he's doing, making sure that he's grifting along the way because he's going to protect programs. I've yet to hear them really talk seriously about the Pentagon at all as they're talking about savings. But they went after USAID and they make it sound like, because a lot of people don't realize how foreign aid benefits them here at home. But it does quite a bit. And I think sometimes we don't talk about it in as plain and simple as way as we need to. So right now, we're all out there, doing everything we can. There's a lot of rallies. We're doing things to support federal employees that currently are especially under attack this week. But remember, the ultimate grift is the tax bill in April, and everything is building up to that. And that's why they're doing what they're doing right now.
Right. He's got to, if he wants to give a $4 trillion gift to billionaires and himself,
yes,
Trump and Musk need to figure out how to cut $4 billion of federal spending.
Trillion.
A trillion, yeah. Excuse me. Thank you very much. Yeah. Because what you're going to do, another tax break under reconciliation like they did last time, it can't be filibustered, but it also can't raise the national debt. I get it. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour, the chair emeritus of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, representing Wisconsin and the U.S. part of Wisconsin, the U.S. House of Representatives. We'll be back with your calls for Representative Pocan.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stay tuned. And welcome back. Joe in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, guys. Thanks for the great show, as usual. I did think that, once again, we always talked about Democrat messaging. And the one thing that we should message harder, rather than Elon Musk now has all of your personal data, your personal information, is to say what really gets people's attention. They have your bank routing information. If you got a COVID payment, if you've ever got a refund, they have direct access and information on everyone in America that has a checking account, savings account. They have that information. And by the way, and this was the question, could you please talk about Trump saying he wants to get rid of the FDIC? Wouldn't that be nice if they drained all the accounts in America in one fell programming swoop? And, we don't have an FDIC to cover you anymore. The plot could be even bigger with these absolute treasonous people. That's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, Joe, I think part of it is they're flooding the zone, right? And there's many things they're talking about, some they're actually doing, and we're immediately responding to those. I actually think, the focus on Elon Musk, he's an unelected billionaire who never could get elected to any kind of office. We need to focus on what he's up to, and by extension, Donald Trump, who he has fully purchased with $270 million in the last election. That's why he has this access, and he's going to benefit directly from his actions. When we talk about that, and that the money is being taken from the middle class and those who aspire to be in the middle class, whether it be education or healthcare, housing, veterans benefits, in order to provide for this tax cut, I think people can relate to and understand it the best. So there are many issues, and what we don't want to do is every shiny object try to take that bait. But I think if we focus on the whale right now, which is Elon Musk, I think we do ourselves the best service in getting across the message on all of those other issues.
Congressman, we have just a little less than a minute left, not really enough time for another question, but so I'll ask one real quickly. Do you guys think that the courts are going to be the place for this battle to be held? I mean, it looks like Mike Johnson and John Thune are just rolling over.
Yeah, in fact, part of it is we can't even join lawsuits as Congress because Mike Johnson has to decide to. There's some things that we can try to do, and we're working on. That's why we need these outside groups. So more than ever, those outside groups that are doing this work, and you can again track that. There's various places now to track the lawsuits. Support them, because that is our best way to fight back right now, is through litigation, through the courts on this. This is what slows down what they're doing and ultimately can overturn what they're doing. And I think we got to hold people accountable for what they're doing also on top of that. We can't forget that last step.
Now, one of the jobs of the Supreme Court is to adjudicate disputes between the legislative and executive branches. But you're saying that for that to happen, it has to go through the Speaker of the House?
For us to have standing as a Congress, for example, when they went after the 2,600 lines last week, and they still are going after those lines to cut them, we couldn't, as members of Congress, form a lawsuit. We had to find a group to do it.
Got it. Okay, Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour, middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program, picking up your calls. We'll be right back. 21 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you right after, in 60 seconds. I just have to lead a spot over on the commercial side of the show, and we'll be right back with you. Stay tuned. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. I have 8 suggestions for Democrats for messaging. Democrats seem to have a messaging problem right now. First, Democrats must frame the fight in simple moral terms. Don't be wonky like, hey, we need to expand social safety net. No, say no child in America should go to bed hungry. Second, Democrats need to stop playing defense and instead seize the populist high ground, like when FDR said, they're unanimous in their hate for me and I welcome their hatred. Third, ruthlessly define the Republican opposition and the morbidly rich oligarchs who own them. Fourth, tell stories instead of facts. Reagan did this with the black welfare queen. He had to lie about it, but we've got lots of great stories. That's number fourth. There's 4 more. And they're all over at HartmannReport.com. The title of the article is, If Obama Had Sent a Mob to Kill a Cop, Republicans Would Never Let You Forget It. And it's all about how Democrats can reinvent their messaging to start winning elections big. Check it out.
Morning light is breaking, a new day has begun, another chance to make a difference under the rising sun.
Welcome back. 22 minutes past the hour. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour, taking your calls. And Dennis in Aptos here with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, real quickly, I've got one on Musk. Born in Ingol, thought he scored a try. He is South African after all. I heard he wasn't very good at the sport of rugby either, and he's a big guy. Anyway, a question for Mark Pocan would be, how many seats away are we exactly from taking back the House? I understand the Democrat won a seat in Iowa last week. is Stephanik's seat still open? If a Democrat wins, don't we take back the House? Aren't we one seat away?
The Iowa seat was in the legislature. We have 215 seats. You need 218, so we're down 3. The Republicans, though, are down a few seats because of appointments by Donald Trump. But to be honest, they're more leaning Republican districts or outright Republican districts. But right now, they can't lose a single vote in the House of Representatives because they have 217. We have 215. You can't pass a bill with 216 to 216. Now, to add complexity, Tom, and I'm trying not to do this, but we have a lot of members any given day are gone. Honestly, if we have more people gone than them, they can pass more things. If they have more people gone than us, they can't take votes. So it's a mess in many ways, but we need 3 seats to take the majority. And just to give you some idea of how this works, North Carolina, when they gerrymandered seats after the normal process, that was 3 seats they took away just in North Carolina. We would have had the majority had it not been for the gerrymandering in North Carolina in the last election.
Wow. Wow. Incredible. Roger in Seattle, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman, and thank you for being on Tom's show. As a retired federal employee, I wanted to ask, I know that you do occasionally talk across the aisle, and maybe to the Republican never-Trumpers, maybe give them some ideas to be like Clinton and Carter. When they did reductions in the federal workforces, they did a little more, to use Bush's phrase, kinder, gentler way. So I was offered by Clinton a buyout, and I think that was the first time the federal government did buyouts.
They used early retirement too, didn't they?
Yeah, well, that was it. I was able to retire at 50.
Yeah.
I'm 75 now. So I was also noticing that not only Carter did the Panama Canal differently than what Trump is talking about, but Carter did zero-based budgeting. So that, again, is a kinder, gentler way of reducing the federal work.
Let's get the Congressman's response to that, Roger. Great stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, Roger, I think the problem is you said about the never-Trumpers to the other side of the aisle. They don't exist. They are like flying unicorns, right? We talk about them a lot, but in Congress, once Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger left, you've got people who may not like them, but will never, ever, ever say it out loud because they're afraid. There is no Republican right now who will stand up to Donald Trump, certainly in the House, and it's not much better in the Senate. So a lot of this is great if it was a novel, but this is real life. We don't have Republican leaders right now standing up. So we've got to make them, and you make them by generating calls to their office and make them bluntly afraid that they're going to lose their seat in the next election. That's how you get change.
In other words, now might be a more important time to call your Republican senators and members of the House.
Very much so.
Yeah, got it. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour, taking your calls. Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of your calls for the Chair Emeritus of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Congressman Mark Pocan. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Pocan.house.gov is his website. You can find his Blue Sky account at Rep. Mark Pocan. And the same thing, at Pocan.house.gov, excuse me, on Blue Sky. And Rep. Mark Pocan over on Twitter. Our book for the book report today is Taking Bullets, Terrorism and Black Life in 21st Century America, Confronting White Nationalism, Supremacy, Privilege, Plutocracy, and Oligarchy, a Poet's Representation and Challenge by Haki R. Madhubuti. He writes, this is from the chapter, page 27, the chapter Terror in the Midst of Prayer and Empire. In our perpetual state of national mourning, where our eyes are watered out and our hearts cease to heal at the rate the Creator meant them to, we hold hands in profound silence as we remember the Mother Emanuel 9 of Charleston, South Carolina, those 9 mothers, fathers, sisters, and brothers. Even before burying, before black earth covered their caskets, Too many ministers, media pundits, and plain white and black folks downgraded the terror that quickened their deaths of our finest in this land to the mental illness and race hatred, in quotes, of a single young white man. He may have acted alone, but he was not alone in his thinking, encouragement, gathering of arms, warped consciousness, confirmation, or ahistorical views, and yeses from the millions in the nation who proudly wear and display the Confederate flag above their hearts and fly it in all of its traitorous glory over a state capitol and other institutions. Again, we find ourselves at war with history and culture, entertaining another call for a national conversation on race and a president weary of trying to make sense of and comfort the grief-stricken nation with words from the highest office of the land. This was written while Obama was president. These are the facts, not an opinion or the ignorant ranting of compromised preachers and television pundits. A 21-year-old white man, a citizen of South Carolina, walked into the sacred and spiritual home of the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church of Charleston, the historic home of black liberation fighter Denmark Vesey, and fatally killed 9 of its members, including the pastor, during Bible study. This was a pure act of domestic terrorism. A modern-day lynching by a young white nationalist who coolly and calmly assassinated 9 black members of Mother Emanuel. Domestic violence and acts of terrorism are on the rise in the United States, as detailed by Charles Kurzman and Daniel Schanzer in their New York Times op-ed, The Other Threat, where they state that, quote, the main terrorist threat in the United States is not from violent Muslim extremists, but from right-wing extremists, end quote. In their national research, local police agencies across the country identified, quote, the militias, neo-Nazis, and sovereign citizens as the major threat the nation faces in regard to extremism, end quote. All of this is homegrown with international connections. Morris Dees and J. Richard Cohen of the Southern Poverty Law Center also writes in the New York Times article, Racists Without Borders, that, quote, Americans tend to view attacks like the mass murder in Charleston as isolated hate crimes, the work of a deranged racist or a group of zealots lashing out in anger unconnected to a broader movement. This view we can no longer afford to indulge. When, according to survivors, Mr. Roof told the victims at the prayer meeting that black people were, quote, taking over the country, he was expressing sentiments that unite white nationalists from the United States and Canada to Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. Unlike those of the Civil Rights era, whose main goal was to maintain Jim Crow in the American South, today's white supremacists don't see borders. They see a white tribe under attack by people of color across the globe. The end of white rule in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, and South Africa, they believe, foreshadowed an apocalyptic future for all white people, a white genocide that must be stopped before it's too late. End of quote. The internationalization of terrorism is not a foreign theory in today's social media world. Dees and Cohen will be speaking at a conference in Budapest about this transnational white supremacism that is emerging as the world grows more connected technologically. The message of white genocide is spreading. Also, David J. Whitaker's Terrorism, Understanding the Global Threat, gives another view. Clearly, our rush to forgive this mass murderer within 96 hours of this supreme tragedy is misguided, anti-human, and does not allow for properly grieving the fallen. As perfectly scripted, displaying the permanent effectiveness of Christian acculturation on the Sunday, June 21st, 2015 morning services of Mother Emanuel Church, the black Christians out-Christianed their white brothers and sisters. Before the morning sermon, the presiding elder, Reverend Norvell Goff Sr., found it necessary to thank the local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies for doing their job. He also stated, quote, a lot of folks expected us to do something strange and break out in a riot. Well, they just don't know us. We are people of faith, end quote. I find this statement inappropriate, insensitive, and ahistorical, implying, whether he meant it or not, that the recent uprising and rebellions in Ferguson, New York, Cleveland, and other parts of the nation were riots and did not include black people of faith, and that somehow they were strange in their social, political, and economic activism. Informed people do not riot against injustice or white terrorism. They study, organize, and strategically struggle at all levels, in the streets, on the campus, in front of the White House, and in corporate boardrooms. Dylan Roof stated his stated intentions were to start a race war, and informed black leadership understands that we cannot pray this away or appeal to any law enforcement agency that all across the country, including Charleston, has been seriously compromised. To label black reaction to murder, terrorism, deep unemployment, substandard housing, etc. is as riot is to blame. The book, Taking Bullets.
Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out. Welcome back. 34 minutes past, or excuse me, 34 minutes past the hour. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour, taking your calls. Donna in Rochester, Minnesota. You're on the air with Representative Pocan.
Well, good morning, Representative Pocan. This is Donna in Rochester, and my husband, Chris, and I used to be your constituents when we lived in the Reedsburg area, and you were so kind to even go door to door with him when he was campaigning for the 50th District. And here we are in Rochester now, and we're still active, but we're 70-plus years, and we want to know the best way that we can help save or bring back our democracy.
Yeah, Donna, thank you. And, Reedsburg, very proud to have that in the district. And again, thanks to your husband for running for the legislature, and trying to be a part of the democracy that we all are in. The best ways are support the groups that are doing litigation right now, because that is our best way to stop things that are happening, and then help us get the communication out about what they're doing. Specifically, if it can help to organize people to reach out and have meetings with their Republican members of Congress. We need 3 people in the House to slip off on any bill to stop things from happening. And, I had a record number, Tom, of calls to my district office in 12 plus years on Monday. And about half of them were on Elon Musk. So we need to make sure that's not happening so much to Democratic offices, but Republican offices, because that's where we have to do stuff. So Donna, support the groups doing litigation. 2, help spread the communications that we put out there, specifically with people trying to meet with their Republican representatives to try to stop things in that way.
I would add to that indivisible.org has a hell of a toolkit set over on their website. A lot of things you can do with them, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ann in Trinity, Florida. Ann, you're on the air with Representative Pocan.
Yes, hi, Representative Pocan, and thank you, Tom, so much for having him on. I'm calling because I think that words matter, and Democrats have got to start using words effectively. Right now, I'm hearing words like scared and fearful for the things that Donald Trump is doing, and I don't want to hear that. I want to hear angry, irate, furious, because those words, I think, mean a little bit more. And I also think that they're not nice people inside, in my opinion. And I think when we hear words like fearful and scared, the empathy in us kind of kicks in. And so we get concerned. When they hear that we're scared and fearful, I think that it actually elates them. And so I think that we need to stop using those words. And I would also like to say that I think that we need to connect Musk to Trump as much as possible. He needs to be Trump's guy's Musk, because Musk is going to be the scapegoat. And in addition, when we're speaking about U.S. aid, I think that we need to draw back, because I immediately think of 9/11, and I think about why having friends around the world matters, and why having stable governments around the world matters that are friendly to the U.S.
Thank you, Ann. Congressman?
Yeah, first, when I had my town hall, I told people I'm pissed off. And I think we all should be pissed off, but you got to do something with that. And honestly, just filling 280 characters on Twitter or Blue Sky, a few fewer characters isn't enough. We have to be doing a little more. So I'm glad when people are asking what they can do. Hopefully we've helped provide that. And secondly, I agree. I think, with everything, they're flooding the zone. They want us to not be able to focus on any one thing. I know their goal of all of this is for that tax cut bill for the wealthiest in this country. So one, keep that in your mind as you're doing it. But I agree. I think Elon Musk is the one to focus on. And don't forget, he's the one who paid for Donald Trump's victory. I mean, 274, I think it is, or $277 million of his money he put towards Donald Trump and Republicans in election efforts. So let's focus on that. He could never get elected on his own. He now has more power than the president in many ways. He's going around doing all this. And I don't think even someone who drinks an occasional glass of MAGA Kool-Aid is going to support that in what he's doing and having access to our data and all the rest. So I agree. Let's keep it simple, because you simply can't tackle every single issue right now.
And that's not to mention Elon Musk spinning the algorithm over at Twitter to favor Trump running up to the election. How is that not an in-kind contribution, and why is there not a lawsuit around that?
But I don't know. I mean, hopefully some groups maybe are looking at that. We also feel that Democratic members of Congress have been seriously ramped back on X as well for information. And that's fine, because honestly, it always kind of was a sewer. It's now, a very, very messy sewer with all these MAGA folks feeling emboldened with what's happening. Look, it's still a lot of people are on there, so we use it. It's kind of like, whether or not you communicate on Fox, and there's a debate on that. We're still using X right now, but understand that they're manipulating lots of ways people get information. So really, they're getting more misinformation and disinformation than anything else.
Yeah, and I saw a report yesterday that 47.5% of all traffic right now on the internet is from bots. So that has to play into it too. Mark in South Bend, Indiana, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Congressman Pocan. Always great to chime in with you, and Tom also. Tom, you mentioned about Trump's proposed tax cut on corporations and individuals to be $6 trillion, and everything that he's trying to eliminate won't even be a drop in a bucket, won't even come near $1 trillion. Now, my question is for Congressman Pocan is this: is the Congressional Budget Office going to do a markup on his proposed tax cut and the tariff that he's installing with executive orders? All the proposed tariff income, is the Congressional Budget Office going to come up with a markup score for that amount of money?
Oh, that's interesting. And will that tariff income also be money that they can use to cut taxes on billionaires?
Yeah, I don't know about the tariff part of it, but don't forget the Congressional Budget Office is under a Republican majority in the House and the Senate. So that's one factor. And also, I think it's important, Tom, just for everyone to understand, when we say $4 trillion, that's over 10 years. And don't forget, any given budgets for a year. So the numbers are a little different. And I think when you're talking the $6 trillion, what I didn't mention was the additional corporate tax cut that we're hearing they want to go down to 15%. The $4 trillion I'm talking about over 10 years simply would extend the current tax cuts for the wealthy that Trump did forward. Anything additional costs more, and certainly if they go more into corporate, it'll cost more. But that's over a 10-year window. So just to help, if they find a way to cut $1 trillion in one budget, really that's more like 10 trillion overall, right? And part of why they have to find money, and the money they're taking away, like we think today might be the day they go after the Department of Education. If you start taking away funds that go for special ed and programs like that, again, more and more people are going to be affected, and more of these people might have even voted for Donald Trump. They are overreaching, but we have to amplify that overreach. On USAID, if I can, just real quick, one of the big rumors was money was going to Colombia for something transgender. It's not even close to true. But all the conservatives are putting it out there in social media. We have to get the truth out there and fight back, because there are enough people either who are independents or even who are Republicans, but not MAGA Republicans, that will listen, and they're overreaching, and they're going to be heard as well. We just have to share in getting that information out.
Larry in Los Angeles, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi. It's my opinion that the Federal Reserve has become a slush fund for the Republican Party. And I say that regarding quantitative easing, where the Fed, in my opinion, bought the Republicans, bought high tech by putting trillions of dollars into their coffers. And they let it be known that if Donald Trump becomes president, they will do it again. And while Biden was president, they took $2 trillion out. They put nearly $4 trillion in there when and all that went into the stock market when Donald Trump was president. That was a very disadvantage to Biden trying to get a...
You're talking about quantitative easing and quantitative tightening. Yeah.
Yeah.
So your
in
question
the case
for Congressman
of Donald
Pocan?
Trump, he got quantitative easing.
So
Can we get transparency in the Fed so that we can know which companies are getting that quantitative easing and how much is being put in there on a minute-by-minute basis? Just like when we look at the Dow, we can see that.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue you could pass legislation that would require the Fed to provide that, but that means Mike Johnson is going to be doing that in the House, and I don't think so, right? You're right, but we have to get that information out still, nonetheless, on our own. I think that's an important part of what our role is right now as the resistance with these efforts happening. But we don't have the most powerful levers right now in the federal government at all. We've got many state legislatures. In fact, they told us today 77% of the Democratic members of Congress have a Democratic attorney general in their state. We need those Democratic attorney generals to do work along with Democratic governors, along with mayors and county executives in Democratic leaning areas, because Trump is trying to attack those blue areas the most. We need them to be generating many of these lawsuits and actions as well.
Senator Chris Murphy just held a press conference and said we have days, not weeks, to rescue democracy in America. I'm curious your thoughts on that as we hit this break here.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I just keep looking at, I guarantee what they are up to is getting this tax break. This is their holy grail, and everything is kind of geared towards that, and flooding the zone is to make us try to lose focus. And my job is going to be to keep going after Elon Musk, because I think he really is the person right now that Trump's using, or Musk may be using Trump. Either way, they are in bed together on getting this done, and I'm going to keep my focus on that while we're hitting these others.
There you go. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour, taking your calls. It's 45 minutes past the hour, Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. You can find his website at pocan.house.gov, and you can find him over on Blue Sky at pocan.house.gov. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan of Wisconsin.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archive.
The Chair Emeritus of the Congressional Progressive Caucus taking your calls for the hour. We'll be right back with your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan. Welcome back. Tom in Media, Pennsylvania. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, Congressman. During the presidential campaign, both sides said that they supported eliminating taxes on tips for tips workers. Do you support a bipartisan clean bill to eliminate taxes on tips?
I'm going to answer it a little different, because there's not a single. The only proposal right now that's officially out there is one that Ted Cruz had last session, which is awful. In fact, Tom, we need to get this word out. I wish I had the numbers in front of me. I did for my town hall last week. It's something like a third of the people who are tip workers already don't pay taxes. And the percent of people that are, I think it's about 2.5%. But the way the bill was written by Ted Cruz, a hedge fund manager could get a very small salary they're taxed on and have much of their the money they make come in a form of what would essentially be a tip, and then not taxed on it. And that's part of the problem. We got to watch. These guys are grifters with PhD in grifting, right? And they are going to, it's not as simple as just saying we're not going to have taxes on tips for the average person who's making minimum wage or near minimum wage. This is a way, at least as currently written, to make it so that some of the wealthiest people in this country pay even less. So we have even less money for education and healthcare and housing and veterans benefits. So, let's make sure we watch real closely, because it's easy to, again, in the form of social media, just put a few words down, but there's much more to this story on the taxing of tips. So watch out for what they could do with it.
Amazing. Steve in Lake Oswego, Oregon, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Rep. Pocan and Tom. Good morning. So Musk and Theo have made their first billion off the usury fees of PayPal. When they broke into the Treasury this weekend, which the Treasury processes $6.9 trillion annually in purchases, sales, and contracts. I find out in Wired magazine that not only were they not only reading the code, but they had accessed the source code from Treasury and most likely downloaded it on their private servers. A 1% transaction fee on $6.9 trillion is $69 billion annually. I think that this was basically a smash and grab, and that Musk is running his PayPal, going to basically take over and put in on his, now that they have the source code for the Treasury processing, that they will put in, they could insert a fee and no one be the wiser. And I think a lot of what he's doing is distraction for this theft. Is there a way that you can, make this more public? Find out, what exactly they have and bring them to heel. I think this is a high-tech smash and grab.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hypothetical, Steve, you're putting out there. Here's what I think. We need to keep the focus on the fact that Elon Musk gets federal contracts, $20 billion plus he's received, plus an undisclosed amount in other areas. So at minimum, $20 billion. And now he's essentially a special federal government employee who has the ability to stop the flow of money and open the flows of money at the federal government level. What does that mean? Any agency that does business with him, they better keep doing it, or else we have to stop that. That's a grid.
There you go. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour, taking your calls. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment. You can find his website at pocan.house.gov. Over on Blue Sky. It's also pocan.house.gov. Check it out. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Donald Trump lost, voter suppression won in 2024. That's the headline over at HartmannReport.com, and just a brilliant article written by Greg Palast exclusively for the Hartmann Report. He writes, Trump lost, that is, if all legal voters were allowed to vote. If all legal ballots were counted, Trump would have lost the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Vice President Kamala Harris would have won the presidency with 286 electoral votes. And if not for the mass purge of voters of color, if not for the mass disqualification of provisional and mail-in ballots, if not for the new mass vigilante challenges in swing states, Harris would have gained at least another 3.5 million votes, topping Trump's popular vote tally by 1.2 million. Greg brings us the numbers. He lays it out. You can read it over at HartmannReport.com, absolutely free. It's titled Trump Lost, Vote Suppression Won at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. Congressman Mark Pocan. Teresa in Missoula, Montana, you're on the air with Representative Pocan.
Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you for taking my call. First-time caller, so I'm a little nervous here.
Well, thank you, Teresa.
I just want to say thank you, Tom, for all you do. And Congressman, I'm very concerned about Musk taking over our government agencies. And I think it's great that Congress people are showing up and that there's protests, but I'm very concerned about the fact that you can't even get in. I want to know if there's anything that can be done. Can you involve, I'm not a lawyer, but can you get a federal judge to help you out to stop what he's doing right now? And also, I would like to know if there's anything you can do to protect our other agencies to keep him out. I understand today he's going to go to NOAA. If there's something you can do preemptively to say he cannot enter and take over our government agencies. And I appreciate you taking my question, and I'll take offline, I guess.
Thank you, Teresa.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa, for being a first-time caller, too. We don't have the ability through legislation. We don't have the seats either in the House or Senate to advance things in that way. We don't have, therefore, the control of the House. So that's why Mike Johnson has to approve lawsuits for the House to be involved. Therefore, we can't. But litigation is crucial, and there are many outside groups doing that, and they are doing it on our behalf, and by our, I mean the American people's behalf, to stop these actions. So supporting those groups is really crucial right now, and there are trackers to see who's all doing that litigation, and I strongly advise people follow that. And then we're going to keep getting the information out about that, but we're not letting up. It's just we don't have some of the powers that we have. Unfortunately, elections have consequences, and not being in the majority is part of why we can't do this. The good news is we're 3 seats short in the House. We think in 2026 we can pick that up, especially given the brazen nature of the Trump administration. But honestly, with the amount of damage happening right now, and their eye is really on this big tax bill coming up in April, now is the time we all have to be active and support any kind of litigation that can stop these things.
Sasha in Kent, Washington, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Well, thank you. Good day, gentlemen. I have the point for the talking point, and that is hit Putin hard. All of these actions are exactly what Putin wants. Tom pointed out earlier this week that USAID has won us friends around the world. Russia and China have fought to take it down, and boom, it's gone. We know that well, shall I say President Musk and the Don are both Putin cohorts. I call the Don a Putin puppet myself. But hit that hard and keep on hitting it, I think.
Yeah, I think what maybe gets lost a little bit, because there's a lot of folks in the D.C. area who have federal employees who are being impacted greatly by what's happening at USAID as an example. But what you just said is the most important part, Sasha, is that we all benefit from funding USAID. The work that we do to make sure that people are healthy around the world, make sure that we're healthy here in this country. The fact that we help economically some of these countries helps that there's commerce between our country and theirs. Right now, China is very aggressive in doing this in countries. If we completely disconnect from that involvement, China will do much more. And whether, I'm not going to get into the China's an adversary debate, but I'm going to get into they are an economic competitor debate. And if you want jobs here, good paying family supporting jobs here, we need worldwide markets. And if you're not involved in the way that we've always been involved, we're going to be at a detriment. There are a lot of values besides just being humans, right, and caring about other humans. That's important. But when you're cutting, HIV funding, and you're cutting, electricity funding to help, have so they can store medicines, all the stuff that USAID does is tremendously important and helpful. But it also benefits us, ourselves, no matter where you live in the country. And I think that's part of the message we're not getting out.
Yeah, China has put hundreds of billions of dollars into Belt and Road, which is their version of USAID. And USAID, I think their budget was only $57 billion last year. I mean, it's pennies. It's a drop in the bucket. Congressman, we just have 15 seconds. Thoughts for the week?
I'm not going to say you have to get the congressional line tattooed on yourself, but you should have it readily available. And especially if you're in Republican districts, you need to call them on every issue. They need to have the tallies. They need to know people in their districts don't support this, and tell them not to be pieces of parsley on the plate of a steak dinner. They have to be active and speaking out.
There you go. And the phone number is 202-224-3121. Congressman, thanks so much. It's always wonderful having you on the program. Really appreciate it again this week. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Yeah. Let's see, what's up next? Oh, the billionaire coup is almost complete and no one stopped it. Can we return to democracy? Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from America's Battle for Media Democracy, The Triumph of Corporate Libertarianism and the Future of Media Reform by Victor Picard. This is from the chapter number 4, page 98. It's titled The Origins of the Fairness Doctrine. Barely a year had passed since the Blue Book controversy when similar conflicts over public interest regulation re-emerged. This round of contentious debates centered on whether to repeal the Mayflower Doctrine, which prohibited broadcasters from editorializing politically. Broadcasters' growing political power emboldened them to challenge the Larry Fly-era FCC decision, which would spark the last major radio reform battle of the 1940s. Fearing a further commercialized, conservative-biased, corporate-dominated medium should broadcasters gain the right to editorialize, many progressives saw at stake, as one news article put it, the future of radio as an instrument of service to the people. Reformers marshaled considerable support from the still intact coalition from the Blue Book debates to rally for the Mayflower decision's preservation. Similar to those debates, broadcasters attacked the reformers' position with First Amendment rights arguments that aimed to delegitimize the FCC's regulatory power over broadcast programming. This episode involved a number of ironies. Most notably, the controversial rule that later became known as the Fairness Doctrine, which to this day is often invoked by progressives as the high watermark of enlightened media policy, actually came about as a kind of consolation prize for post-war liberals who had advocated stricter regulation. The following chapter recovers this forgotten history. In doing so, it lays bare a number of early tensions and contradictions that closed out a decade of contentious policy debates around normative understandings of media's democratic role. This history throws into sharp relief several significant parallels and connections to 21st century media challenges, particularly around the question of whether government has any affirmative regulatory authority over media. Toward the end of the 1940s, progressive forces were in disarray. The remains of the Popular Front, including many New Deal liberals, were largely disintegrated, especially after the Progressive Party's disastrous loss in the 1948 election. What had been a rising social democratic challenge was now widely seen as dangerously socialistic, even in its diminished state. With the communist witch hunt in full swing, the broadcast industry exploited Cold War politics to discredit reformers by claiming that the reformers' real agenda was to destroy free radio. J. Edgar Hoover harassed the FCC on a regular basis with letters and unsolicited reports on subversive broadcasters. And the FCC's actions were aggressively scrutinized as Congress and the FBI put the commission on notice for a number of unofficial investigations. Writing to Larry Fly, this is the FCC commissioner, about the endless red baiting, Clifford Durr confided, "When I read of the present plans to protect the country against the dangerous thinking of us bureaucrats, I'm inclined to look back with nostalgia on the days when the commission stood more or less firmly against our friend J. Edgar." By the late 1940s, the FCC's more progressive wing, aside from Durr, had become more passive on issues related to regulatory oversight of broadcasting programming. The tide clearly had turned in the favor of the commercial broadcasters. Rendering the landscape even less hospitable for media reform, the industry attacks against the FCC coincided with an increasingly right-wing tilt in D.C. politics. Even before the 1948 presidential election, liberals were in various states of retreat. FDR had died, the New Deal agenda lay in tatters, and Republicans were coming off a congressional sweep in the 1946 midterm elections. The Democrats would regain some ground electorally by taking back Congress in '48, but the ideological shift was more permanent. During his campaign, President Truman characterized 1948 as the decisive year of the challenge, with a primary choice between, quote, between a parcel labeled progressive liberalism and a parcel labeled reactionary conservatism, end quote. However, Truman's liberalism often proved to be largely rhetorical. After he eked out a victory in a four-way race, his administration quickly shied away from the previous administration's aggressive liberalism, ever mindful of Southern conservative Democrats and Republicans nipping at their flanks. Truman's market-friendly orientation led him to espouse commercial broadcasters' policy positions, invoking his support for the, quote, American system, end quote, of broadcasting. He insisted in an open letter to Broadcasting Magazine's Sol Taishoff that, quote, America, as the birthplace of radio, should have a free, competitive system, unfettered by artificial barriers and regulated only as to the laws of nature and the limitation of facilities, end quote. Deferring to the laws of the market, Truman ordered, is, quote, preferred over rigid government regulation of a medium that by its very nature must be maintained as free as the press, end quote. The same issue of broadcasting contained an editorial amplifying Truman's message to the FCC that regulation was to be off the table. A similar statement followed 10 months later, with Broadcasting triumphantly announcing that Truman, quote, emphatically reaffirmed his belief in completely free radio, end quote, which according to the editors translated into, quote, a declaration on behalf of a broadcasting system unshackled by un-American regulations, end quote. It's amazing. America's battle for media democracy.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the second hour of our program. The billionaire coup is almost complete, and this is looking pretty damn grim right now. And you know how, and no one seems to have stopped it. Can we return to democracy? You know, there's one thread that ties together Trump's destruction of American government agencies, his offer to take the Gaza crisis off Israel's hands and dump it on our military. And let me just speak to that very quickly. Netanyahu came over here, and when Netanyahu came over here, he was in an absolute state of crisis because Gaza is a complete mess. He bombed the crap out of it. 90% of all the buildings have been destroyed or damaged. It's going to cost hundreds of billions of dollars, or certainly tens of billions of dollars, to rebuild Gaza. And Israel doesn't want to pay for it. They don't want to do it. They don't want to have anything to do with it. They don't want to occupy Gaza. They don't want to be, you know, I mean, this is the reason why they left Gaza years ago, was because they were tired of having their soldiers be shot at. So Netanyahu comes over here and says, Trump's an idiot. If I flatter him and butter him up, you know, maybe I can get him to take this problem off my hands. And it's exactly what Trump offered to do. I mean, everybody's freaking out about how this is going to blow up the Middle East and everything else, and that's all true. I mean, you know, keep in mind, the reason bin Laden attacked us on 9/11 was because we still had an Air Force base in Saudi Arabia after the first Gulf War. George Herbert Walker Bush negotiated a deal with the Saudis to stage an Air Force base for attacks on Saddam Hussein back in whatever the year was. And, you know, as he was running, 1992, I believe it was, as he was running against Bill Clinton, he wanted to have this short war, maybe it was 91, and it, you know, turned out to be a 3-day war. But after the war, he didn't close that Air Force base. And bin Laden was just beside himself because American women were walking around with their elbows showing and driving cars, and men were watching pornography and not covering their heads. I mean, not growing beards. I mean, it was just it's blasphemy, right? This is far worse. So, you know, Trump put a target on our backs, but I would say Netanyahu put a target on our backs by suckering Trump into making this stupid suggestion, offering this stupid deal that nobody's ever going to follow. But anyhow, enough of that. There's a common thread that ties together Trump and Musk's destruction of our government agency, his offer to take Gaza off Israel's hands, and our representatives and senators' failure to challenge him. And this is how kingdoms operate, rule by decree, which proves that we're asking the wrong question. If you plug, can American democracy survive Trump, into a search engine, you will see that there are literally hundreds, maybe thousands of websites and blogs and posts and social media posts that literally have that as their headline. Can American democracy survive Trump, or variations thereof? But American democracy was kneecapped by 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court back in 1978, when they ruled that money was the same thing as free speech and corporations are the same thing as persons. I mean, the correct question is, can the American system, now that it's become flooded with dark money and that the right to vote has become a mere privilege in red states, ever again represent the interests of average citizens? Can we ever return to democracy? You know, in an open call on X yesterday with Republican Senators Joni Ernst and Mike Lee, apartheid billionaire Elon Musk, whose father says he was chauffeured to school in White-Run, South Africa in a Rolls Royce, went off on regulations. He says regulations basically should be default gone. Not default there, default gone. And if it turns out that we missed the mark on a regulation, we can always add it back in. And in a childlike echo of Ayn Rand's book, Atlas Shrugged, Musk adds, these regulations are added willy-nilly all the time, so we've just got to do a wholesale spring cleaning of regulation to get the government off the backs of everyday Americans so people can get things done. If the government has millions of regulations holding everyone back, well, that's not freedom. We got to restore freedom. Right. When billionaires talk about freedom, you have to know what they're talking about is they want their taxes cut and they want their companies deregulated so that they can make more profit and screw us. I mean, think about this. Both capitalism and democracy could be viewed as like a game, you know, like a football game. And imagine if the NFL were to say, oh, we've got too many regulations and just suspend them all just, you know, before Sunday's Super Bowl. So the Chiefs, acting like elected Democrats, say, well, we'll continue to play by the old rules. Those worked well. But, you know, the Eagles, they decide to start gut punching and face mask pulling and even throw 5 extra players on the field. The only team that would win under those circumstances would be the one willing to play dirty or buy off the refs. And increasingly, that's where we are today, both with our democracy and our economy. We know this is crazy. Every state in the union has an insurance commissioner because for decades, for a half a century or longer, insurance companies just routinely rip people off. And finally, every state said enough. Same thing with banks and brokerages. We regulate them because the last 2 times we deregulated them in the 1920s and the 1990s, it produced the Republican Great Depression of the 1930s and the Bush crash of 2008. We regulate automobile manufacturers because, hey, when we didn't, Ford killed 900 people with the Pinto, and GM trucks killed 2,000 people with their side saddle gas tanks. We regulate refineries because their emissions cause cancer. We regulate drugs because unscrupulous manufacturers have killed people in previous eras. We regulate workplace safety because the Triangle Shirtwaist fire killed 146 young women. We regulate traffic with signs and stoplights to keep order and reduce accidents. We regulate police to prevent them from abusing innocent people. We regulate building codes so people's houses don't catch on fire or collapse. And there was a time in America when we regulated money and politics and when we guaranteed the right to vote. Those 2 types of regulations were passed back in the 19th century and the early 20th century. In response to multiple scandals, like in 1899 when William Cooper, the second richest guy in America, stood outside the Montana legislature and passed out $1,000 checks to everybody who voted to make him the senator for the state. I mean, that led straight to the Tillman Act. In 1905, under Teddy Roosevelt, it was passed that said no corporation can give money in a in a federal election. Well, it wasn't just Cooper that led to the Tillman Act. It was a whole series of abuses. We passed regulations guaranteeing a minimum wage, unemployment insurance, and the right to unionize in order to create the world's first large-scale middle class. And we regulated the morbidly rich with a 90% income tax rate to prevent them from amassing so much wealth that they could challenge our government, which is, by the way, where we are right now. And of course, it's those regulations, money in politics, regulating money in politics, regulating the right to vote, and preventing the accumulation of dangerous amounts of wealth, to which today's broligarchs most strenuously object. In each case, it was 5 Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court who gutted our protective regulations and put America on a collision course with today's oligarchic neo-fascist takeover. I mean, they ruled that billionaires can buy politicians. It's no longer called bribery, it's called free speech when you give money to a politician in exchange for their votes. They claim that corporations aren't soulless creations of the law, but they're persons with human rights under the Bill of Rights. They claim that voting is not a right in America in open defiance of U.S. law. They said it's a mere privilege, giving the green light to Republicans to purge or refuse to count over 4 million votes in the last election. And the result of all this Republican corruption is that the will of the majority of Americans hasn't happened since the 60s. It was the 60s when we got Medicare and Medicaid and Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act and all Title IX, Title X, all of these protections, all of these benefits, food stamps, Section 8 housing, or Section 9, whatever it is, all this stuff, that all happened in the 60s. Why did it stop in the 70s? Because the Supreme Court said that they struck down all these regulations on dark money and big money in politics. And ever since then, big money has frozen us like a mosquito in amber. I mean, even Barack Obama, he wanted to create a national health care system. He had to do it on the platform of for-profit insurance companies, and he couldn't even get the public option through so that you could buy into Medicare at any age, which shouldn't have been that big a lift. But the right-wing billionaires in the insurance industries, they demanded that he bow down to them. Dark money has destroyed the notion of one person, one vote. Elon Musk just bought the White House for Trump for $270 million. Monopolies, allowed because corporations can now buy politicians, have destroyed the small businesses that once filled America's malls and downtowns. And voter suppression and voter list purges that knocked 4 million votes and voters off the rolls in the 2024 election, as Greg Palast documented on this program, gave us Donald Trump. So yeah, Elon, let's do away with all the regulations that these wannabe kings, Donald and Elon, are saying. And let's make America, unregulated, right? Let's make it look and operate like Syria and its failed state relatives. After all, freedom, right? F-R-E-E-D-U-M-B. 16 minutes past the hour. I'll be right back with more of the news of the day and your calls. Stay tuned.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Helping you win the water cooler wars. I'll be right back with you. Welcome back. John in Minneapolis. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
I guess my question to you is, you've made a lot of good points here, and so have the listeners, the callers, the other callers. How about HIPAA violation along with, all our sensitive personal information, financial information? Musk is in violation of HIPAA. He has no right to any of our personal health data. And that's basically it, yeah.
We don't, specifically, you're assuming that he would access HIPAA data by what, going through Medicare and Medicaid files?
Just the fact that if you go into Medicare or Medicaid and then your insurance is linked up to Medicare, They see where everything has been paid out to.
Right.
They have,
so they know all your
have
diagnoses.
Yep. And, I did want to add one more thing in terms of coup d'etat. I think, you're absolutely right. We're in a coup d'etat. What are our politicians going to do to get the loyalty of the military to prevent them from going after us rather than sticking with the Constitution? Are they going to defend the Constitution? That's another issue that they could address. And, it will put people on the spot, but I'm sorry. We're fighting for our survival here.
Yeah.
And I really worry about Musk getting, like they're trying to get rid of all the CIA agents. And then, also the FBI, they're going to go after people that investigated, the insurrection. And this is exactly what happens. I've known people that have lived through this kind of fascist takeover, and the only thing that we can do in the end is help each other. But I think that at this point we can do even more than that, legislatively and in the courts, to prevent what looks like that's what's going to happen. All he has to do is say, well, I don't want any demonstrations, and if they demonstrate, I'm going to declare martial law. Don't you think he would do that?
I think what's very, very likely, or is certainly very possible, I'm not sure if it's likely, but I think the past is a good indicator of the future, is that if protests get wild, if protests get large, that there will be black bloc protesters, these so-called lefties who go out and do property damage, and there will be right-wing provocateurs like Umbrella Man in your town, in Minneapolis, the guy who started the trashing of buildings in Minneapolis. Turns out he was an off-duty cop and a right-winger. And when those things happen, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we have another Kent State, if we have the military shooting at people.
Yes. Well, the Proud Boys were involved in vandalism and arson here in Minneapolis, and all that information was given by Keith Ellison to the FBI, but that's probably no longer there anymore.
Yeah.
But we know it happened.
Yeah. John, thank you. Thanks for the call. It's always nice to hear from you. I appreciate it. 21 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Stay tuned. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So between his tax cuts and crashing the debt ceiling and shifting billions of Treasury dollars into crypto and tariffs and all this other stuff, Trump is threatening to crash our economy. And he doesn't seem to be particularly worried about that. Why would that be? Well, first off, economic disasters are great excuses to cut taxes. Both Reagan and George W. Bush used recessions as their excuse to stimulate the economy by cutting trillions from the taxes of billionaires. Secondly, economic crises increase the tolerance for strongman governments. Hitler rode to power in Europe based on the Great Depression. And third, billionaires make a fortune when there's a market crash because they can buy all the stock that average people are trying to unload from their 401ks to pay the damn rent. There's a whole article about this that lays the whole thing out over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled Crashing the Economy, Trump's Blueprint for Power and Profit. Check it out.
Five men in black robes took the gavel and lied, said money's got a voice and the people got denied. Turned speech into dollars, turned votes into gold. sold out our future while the nation got a roll. $1, one vote, that's the game that they played. Now the rich make the rules and the rest get betrayed. They gutted our rights, threw them out in the street. Now democracy's drowning in a dark money sea. The billionaire coup is complete, no one stopped it. 5 on the court and the people just lost it. Bought off the ballot, sold off the land. Now the law's just a weapon in a rich man's hand.
About 24 minutes past the hour, the most reckless idea in modern history, Trump's plan to take over Gaza. This would be an absolute bloodbath. There is no doubt about it. This is the 5th country now that Trump has threatened to invade. Canada, Mexico, Panama, Greenland, by extension Denmark, and now Gaza. Of course it's not going to happen. It is not going to happen, but he just gave Benjamin Netanyahu the biggest get-out-of-jail card. And the Netanyahu administration has posted big posters along the biggest highways in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv that say, "Thank you, President Trump. Thank you, Donald Trump, for taking this burden of Gaza off Israel." And of course, let's not forget that it was a year ago that Jared Kushner said Gaza's waterfront property could be very valuable. It's a little bit of an unfortunate situation there, but from Israel's perspective, I'd do my best to move the people out and then clean it up. And according to Puck News, Jared Kushner helped write Donald Trump's remarks yesterday, where he stood next to Netanyahu and said, "Yeah, we'll take over the Middle East. We'll take over Gaza. We'll let our soldiers get shot at instead of Israeli soldiers. Not to worry. We'll let 1.5 billion Muslims in the world be pissed off at us instead of at you, Mr. Netanyahu. No problem." Trump just volunteered all of us for another 9/11, or worse. Meanwhile, Fox News hosts are praising this, going, "Oh, isn't he smart?" Seriously. Laura Ingraham, "We may actually solve a problem. We may actually make money on it." Like that's a bad thing for the United States to get repaid for the tens of billions of dollars just in the last few years we've dumped into the Middle East. Jesse Waters, "Trump's shooting to be the greatest deal maker in history. There's one deal no president's ever been able to make. Peace in the Middle East." Yeah, right. You think this is going to bring peace in the Middle East? I got a bridge to sell you. And Sean Hannity, "He is negotiating and sending a loud message to the entire Arab world. Get engaged, end this conflict once and for all, eliminate terrorism, and a new day will begin." No, the message he's sending to the entire Arab world is America, you should be in your crosshairs. Pull another bin Laden. Meanwhile, there's the Democrats in the Senate, they just voted yesterday to confirm Doug Collins as Secretary of Veterans Affairs. 24 Democrats voted for this guy. He's a Republican from the House of Representatives who signed an amicus brief to overturn the election in 2020. He's an election denier. He's a Trump humper, and 24 Democrats in the Senate voted for him. Michael Bennet, Richard Blumenthal, Masto, Durbin, Fetterman, Gallego, Gillibrand, Hassan, Himmerich, Hickenlooper, Kane, Kelly, King, Klobuchar, Lujan, Ossoff, Peters, Rosen, Sanders, Schiff, Shaheen, Slotkin, Warnock, and Welch. If any of them represent you, you might want to give them a call and let them know what you think about that. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be right back with your calls. Stick around. In the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, our book is by Frantz Fanon, and it's The Wretched of the Earth. This is from the chapter on national culture on page 145. It sort of reads like Thomas Paine, actually. Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it in relative opacity. In the underdeveloped countries, preceding generations have simultaneously resisted the insidious agenda of colonialism and paved the way for the emergence of the current struggles. Now that we are in the heat of combat, we must shed the habit of decrying the efforts of our forefathers or feigning incomprehension at their silence or passiveness. They fought as best they could with the weapons they possessed at the time, and if their struggle did not reverberate throughout the international arena, the reason should be attributed not so much to a lack of heroism, but to a fundamentally different international situation. More than one colonized subject had to say, "We've had enough." More than one tribe had to rebel. More than one peasant revolt had to be quelled. More than one demonstration had to be repressed for us to stand firm, certain of our victory. For those of us who are determined to break the back of colonialism, our historic mission is to authorize every revolt, every desperate act, and every attack aborted or drowned in blood. In this chapter, we'll analyze the fundamental issue of the legitimate claim to a nation. The political party that mobilizes the people, however, is little concerned with this issue of legitimacy. Political parties are concerned solely with daily reality, and it is in the name of this reality, in the name of this immediacy which influences the present and future of men and women, that they make their call to action. The political party may very well speak of the nation in emotional terms, but it is primarily interested in getting the people who are listening to understand that they must join in the struggle if they quite simply want to exist. We now know that in the first phase of the national struggle, colonialism attempts to diffuse nationalist demands by manipulating economic doctrine. At the first sign of a dispute, colonialism feigns comprehension by acknowledging with ostentatious humility that the territory is suffering from serious underdevelopment that requires major social and economic reforms. And it is true that certain spectacular measures, such as the opening of work sites for the unemployed here and there, delay the formation of a national consciousness by a few years. But sooner or later, colonialism realizes it is incapable of achieving a program of socioeconomic reforms that would satisfy the aspirations of the colonized masses. Even when it comes to filling their bellies, colonialism proves to be inherently powerless. The colonial state very quickly discovers that any attempt to disarm the national parties at a purely economic level would be tantamount to practicing in the colonies what it did not want to do in its own territory. And it is no coincidence that today the doctrine of Cartierism is on the rise just about everywhere. Cartier's bitter disillusionment with France's stubborn determination to retain ties with people it will have to feed, whereas so many French citizens are in dire straits, reflects colonialism's inability to transform itself into a nonpartisan aid program. Hence, once again, no need to waste time repeating, better to go hungry with dignity than to eat one's fill in slavery. On the contrary, we must persuade ourselves that colonialism is incapable of procuring for colonized people the material conditions likely to make them forget their quest for dignity. Once colonialism is understood where its social reform tactics would lead it, back come the old reflexes of adding police reinforcements, dispatching troops, and establishing a regime of terror better suited to its interests and its psychology. Within the political parties, or rather parallel to them, we find the cultured class of colonized intellectuals. The recognition of a national culture and its right to exist represent their favorite stomping ground. Whereas the politicians integrate their action in the present, the intellectuals place themselves in the context of history. Faced with the colonized intellectuals' debunking of the colonist theory of a pre-colonial barbarism, colonialism's response is mute. It is especially mute since the ideas put forward by the young colonized intelligentsia are widely accepted by metropolitan specialists. It is in fact now commonly recognized that for several decades, numerous European researchers have widely rehabilitated African, Mexican, and Peruvian civilizations. Some have been surprised by the passion invested by the colonized intellectuals in their defense of a national culture. But those who consider this passion exaggerated are strangely apt to forget that their psyches and their egos are conveniently safeguarded by the French or German culture, whose worth has been proven and which has gone unchallenged. I concede the fact that the actual existence of an Aztec civilization has done little to change the diet of today's Mexican peasant. I concede that whatever proof there is of the once mighty Songhai civilization does not change the fact that the Songhais today are undernourished, illiterate, abandoned to the skies and water, with a blank mind and glazed eyes. But as we have said on several occasions, this passionate quest for a national culture prior to the colonial era can be justified by the colonized intellectuals' shared interest in stepping back and taking a hard look at the Western culture in which they risk becoming ensnared. fully aware that they're in the process of losing themselves and consequently of being lost to their people. These men work away with raging heart and furious mind to renew contact with their people's oldest inner essence, the furthest removed from colonial times. Let us delve deeper. Perhaps this passion and this rage are nurtured, or at least guided, by the secret hope of discovering beyond the pleasant wretchedness, beyond the self-hatred, something that redeems us.
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com.
It's no coincidence that the time in Europe when the church ran the continent, from around the 5th century to around the 15th or 16th century, that 1,000-year period is referred to as the Dark Ages. This is what happens when religion controls politics, when religion controls the state, the nation, and every nation of Europe was controlled essentially by the Catholic Church during that period of time. It got busted up with the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century. This was what the founders of this country very much knew about. George Washington refused to declare himself a Christian. Thomas Paine wrote an entire book embracing atheism. Ben Franklin fled Massachusetts as a teenager to escape the religious threats. And Thomas Jefferson went off on it regularly. There's a whole piece about how the Republicans are trying to impose a new dark age on America. It's all laid out, all the quotes and all the links over at hartmannreport.com. Check it out.
Once upon a time, a vote was meant to stand, a voice for every worker, not just the wealthy hand. But power found a loophole, bought the system out. Now money drowns the voices, now greed decides the route. Can we dial back big money and democracy? Can we break the chains of cash that steal our right to be? When a dollar speaks louder than a million cries, we're not the ones they serve, we're just left outside. It started slow, but money grew, corruption took its place. 1976, they said that cash was speech, that spending was a right. And ever since, the billionaires have bought up every fight. Can we dial back big money and
About
democracy?
36 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Rich in Cedro Woolley, Washington. Hey, Rich, what's on your mind today?
Well, first, a couple of weeks ago, you had a woman call in from Marble Mount, Washington, and Cedro Woolley is kind of a red backwater way, a couple hours north of Seattle. Marble Mount is like 6 feet of crimson muck. We call it upriver, like banjo music upriver. I just want to say to her and all the little blue dots in red swamps that you're not alone, and there's more of us than there are of them.
Well said,
And
Rich.
that being said, I also had a question for Congressman Pocan, but he's gone. Maybe you can help me. On those days when there are more Democrats than Republicans, why don't they recall Mike Johnson, install Chuck and Jeffries, and immediately change the rule to you need a supermajority to vote out the speaker?
Well,
and if you can't change the rule, at least shove through a bunch of bills so they can say, look, we tried to fix Social Security, we tried to fix the post office, we tried to do whatever, but Republicans voted against it.
Yeah, they're actually trying to do that. I mean, you've got the Elon Musk Act from Mark Pocan. There's, a lot of people are proposing legislation. The problem is that it has to get out of committee. All these committees have Republican majorities. They will not allow any Democratic legislation out of committee. Any effort to depose Mike Johnson will be shut down, although I recommended that in my Daily Take yesterday.
You know, it takes, I think, six or seven votes now to call into question his speakership. But I think there should be serious pushing back.
I thought it was one.
It used to be one.
Did they change it?
Yeah, the Republicans changed it about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. No, actually, they changed it in January when they got sworn in and they redid the rules. So yeah. So
even for a day, they could put it out there. Look, we've had this Social Security bill. What is it? Social Security 2025 or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, push that through real quick. Bing, bang, boom. Anyway.
Yeah, the problem is you can't push anything through if you can't get the bill out of committee and if you can't get it on the floor. And both those things require Mike Johnson's approval or the approval of a Republican committee chair. I mean, over in the Oversight Committee, Democrats are trying to subpoena Elon Musk right now. Jerry Connolly just came out and did this whole press conference about, you know, we're trying to subpoena Elon Musk. But James Comer, the head of the committee, you know, the chairman of the committee, refuses to allow it. So, you know, what you have is complete Republican obstruction to any kind of Democratic effort. So basically what they're left with is standing outside the Treasury building with a bunch of signs and bullhorns, which is going on right now and has been going on for a couple of days. So that's where we're at, Rich. It's going to take an uprising by the people. It's going to take a groundswell of popular discontent to put these people back on their heels. And like Mark Pocan said, they're trying to cut a couple $1 trillion out of the federal government expenditures so that they can extend Donald Trump's tax cuts that expire this year. And they're going to try and do this apparently in April, maybe in March. That they want to extend those tax cuts, but they can't raise the debt ceiling because they won't be able to, you know, they won't have any Democratic votes, and they've got a handful of Republicans who won't go along with it. So what are they going to do? They're going to gut the government to make room for more tax breaks for billionaires. And who do they have doing it? A billionaire president and a billionaire co-president on his right hand. So that's what's going on. Rich, I got to run, but thanks for the call. Mark in Portland. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hey, Tom. I was wondering about, there was talk about the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, a while back, and whether they were going to get rid of that. And I'm wondering if that's still something that's on the table with Trump. And that would certainly cause great panic for banks that are holding our money.
Yeah.
Have you heard anything about that?
I don't. No, I haven't. You know, the closest is this morning, one of our callers said that today Musk was supposedly going over to hit NOAA, you know, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the organization that funds all of our weather reporting and stuff, presumably because they have been talking about how the impact of climate change. And the fossil fuel billionaires who own the GOP are very upset about that. But no, I don't know about what's going on with FDIC other than the rumor that I've heard that it's in their crosshairs. Pretty much every government agency is in their crosshairs. And you're absolutely right. If you do away with FDIC, you're going to see a banking crash like we had in the 1930s. And we don't want that.
You'll have a run on the banks, and everyone's going to want their money.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yep. Mark, thank you for the call. Spot on. Wanda in San Luis Obispo, California. Hey, Wanda,
Yes.
what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. It is San Luis Obispo, and the gentleman that just called, it's the same concern for my wife and I as the FDIC. Do we pull our money out now? I mean, I was hoping that Congressman Pocan was still on the line because how do we watch this? What do we do? I mean, how can we laser in on this and say, no, we don't, you know, this is keep your hands out of the banks?
I would be astonished if they succeed in gutting the FDIC or its equivalent organization that guarantees savings and loan organizations. But that said, if you're doing business with one of the big banks, I strongly encourage you to open an account with a local, locally owned credit union and move as much of your banking into that credit union as you possibly can.
So the credit union would be safer than we're involved in like small banks, not the big banks, but
credit unions have an organization that has it's pretty much the clone of the FDIC. So your deposits in a credit union are guaranteed up to $250,000, just like they are in a bank. The difference is that credit unions don't operate for profit. They operate for the benefit of their members. When you open an account with a credit union, you become a member, and the members vote on the officers, and the members make the major decisions for each one of the credit unions. And that's a big deal. It means that you don't have banking executives who have a big investment
in hitting you with fees and tricking you into buying things and hustling, bad insurance at you and all the other, jacking credit card rates up, all the other little tricks that banks do to fatten their bottom line, because credit unions don't have a bottom line. So,
do you think our money in this is, I know it's going to be your opinion, but would be safe for, let's say, the next 2 or 3 months?
Yes. Yeah, although, I mean, there's no way to know exactly what these guys are going to do. I mean, they are following Mark Zuckerberg's instruction, move fast and break things. And, but I would think that they'll probably go after credit unions after they go after the banks. But whether they're going to even go after the banks or not, or whether that was just a false flag, I don't know, Wanda, and I'm not sure anybody does. Wanda, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Don't freak out. Just keep your eye on what's going on, and I promise you, if any of this stuff breaks, you'll hear it first here. So, Wanda, thank you for the call. Michael in Barrington Hills, Illinois. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. It's the issue of tariffs and so-called tariff income that was referred to, Congressman Pocan. I don't think of tariffs having an income because they're paid by the corporation here. So, for example, against China, there's a 25% tariff possibly coming up. They'll have to pay 25% here, person here, into the Border Patrol, actually, here. So China doesn't pay any tariff. They don't pay it.
No, we pay the tariffs, but the tariffs are federal revenue.
Yeah, but they're like a tax on somebody here, and it doesn't make any sense to me.
100% of the cost of operating our federal government, 100% of the cost of operating our federal government from the founding of our republic until the Civil War was paid for by tariffs. 100%.
Yeah.
2/3 from the Civil War to World War I, 1/3 from World War I to World War II. It's around 2% right now. But Trump has said, or maybe it's Musk, one or the other of them has actually said that they would like to do away with the income tax and fund the government with tariffs.
That's crazy. Yeah. I think that's crazy.
It is. I mean, it really is. And I'm a fan of tariffs, actually. But, doing
small tariffs,
probably. Yeah, well, targeted tariffs. I want to use tariffs as part of a national industrial policy, not a, let's do away with income taxes for billionaires strategy. Michael, I got to run. I'm sorry, but excellent point. Thank you for the call. 45 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
It's your media support group for We the People. Right back with your calls right after this. And welcome back. Patricia in North Bend, Washington. Hey, Patricia, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. It's so good to talk to you live. Well, quickly, I wanted to say that, there's 50-state protests going on today, and I am awesome. Me too. It's my favorite color. I am concerned that they're trying to create so much tension and anger that they will have to impose martial law and bring out the military. And then we will have, military army walking up and down our streets, with guns, just the same way they did in Nazi Germany.
Or in Pinochet's Chile, yeah.
Yes. And real quickly, on going to war to Gaza, don't we need congressional approval to do that?
Yes. the Constitution
not that
says
he's going to wait.
So,
not that he's going to wait for any kind of congressional approval, because he's just criminally doing everything he wants to do and breaking the law.
Yes.
So, based on the fact that they're breaking the law and robbing money from all of these institutions, I think we should all stop paying our taxes. I seem to recall in 1773 there was a little revolt called the Boston Tea Party.
Yeah, it's not.
What do you think of that idea?
Well, we don't pay taxes the way we did in 1773. You can't go down and talk to the local tax collector, or, as in the case of the Boston Tea Party, tar and feather him. Although the guy that they tar and feathered was stealing tea, but in any case.
I can change my withholding and, owe them a whole lot of money at the end of the year and just refuse to write a check.
Yeah, if you do that, you'll get hit with penalties. I would not recommend that, Patricia. I would recommend getting as active as you can in speaking to your elected politicians, both at the federal and the state level, and joining organizations like indivisible.org and others that are doing the good work, so that they can get your word out there.
That is done.
Yeah,
that is done. Good. I've done all of that,
okay.
And I continue. But I'm just so angry, and I see no reason why we should continue. We Americans should continue to fund this.
I get it, Patricia, but at the moment, that's not a fight that you want as an individual that you want to fight. Patricia, thanks for the call. Ed in Chicago. Hey, Ed, what's up?
Hey, Tom, quickly, in your rant, you mentioned the Super Bowl, and my father was a combat veteran from World War II, and because Trump is going to the Super Bowl and he put a Nazi in charge of my checking account, I'm going to boycott the Super Bowl. I would love to see that as a meme, because if we could have the lowest ratings ever, it would be a great way to poke at him and Fox.
Yeah.
But the reason I wanted to call is because of, again, the FDIC that everybody's talking about. I don't remember if it was either on Democratic Underground or The Guardian where I was reading it out, I think it was last week. I have a ton of respect for Congressman Pocan, but his answer to your first caller about Trump having access to our routing number, or Musk having access to our routing numbers and all that, is exactly what is wrong with Democratic Party messaging. The Democratic Party should be scaring the hell out of everybody that their bank accounts are not safe, and that we as Democrats will do everything we can to make sure the FDIC maintains it does not go away.
Right. They should be taking they should be asking themselves, what would Republicans do in this situation?
Right.
But
and
they're not.
Congressman Pocan's answer was, completely, he could not have been more wrong.
Yeah, too milquetoast. I get it, Ed. Thank you very much. Whew. We'll be back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Stay with us. We'll be back in 60 seconds. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Back in 1968, when Lyndon Johnson was president, Earl Warren resigned from the Supreme Court. He was a liberal, even though he had been appointed by Eisenhower. Johnson wasn't able to replace him, in part because of Republican opposition in the Senate. And so when Nixon came in, he had this opening, but he wanted to have two openings. He wanted to get rid of Abe Fortas, who was the most liberal member of the court. So he had his Attorney General, John Mitchell, start an investigation into Abe Fortas's wife. Now, there was nothing there. There was no smoke at all. She had done absolutely nothing wrong, and history has proven that. But they were going to drag her before a grand jury and possibly before Congress and just, drag her through the mud. And this caused Abe Fortas to resign, and that gave Nixon two openings, and that's how the court turned to the right. I'm suggesting that Democrats should do the same thing with Justice Thomas. I've got an op-ed about it at Hartmann Report. You can read it over there. Check it out.
Trump steps up, the cameras roll, he points and lays the blame. Says the press is out to get him, playing a rigged game. Fake news, they twist the facts, they're enemies of me. But silencing the truth is how you kill democracy. Donald Trump is crushing the media, tearing down the light, turning facts to fiction, hiding wrong from right. Calls them traitors, calls them liars, bends the story fast. When the truth gets buried, it echoes from the past.
Welcome back. 53 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Susan in Buffalo, New York. Hey, Susan, what's up?
Hi, Tom.
Hey.
Just a couple of things. He was talking about the FDIC. Now, didn't they do something with the CPFB already on Monday?
Yeah, they went. Musk announced on X that he had shut down the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. I haven't been able to verify that. It just kind of got lost in the noise, but he said that he was going to do it.
And as far
and they have oversight over the banks. Yeah, you're right.
I'm sorry.
They are a regulator of the banks. They have oversight over the banks.
Right. And a violation of the Protection and Privacy Act? How do they get away with getting into all of our record systems?
They're breaking all kinds of laws, Susan, and they're getting away with it because the administration is responsible for enforcing the law. You know, it's the Justice Department and the FBI who would enforce the laws. And Pam Bondi got sworn in this morning as our new Attorney General. Do you really think Pam Bondi is going to go after Elon Musk and Donald Trump? No way. She's a complete tool.
No way. And Representative Green from Texas announced on the floor this morning that he is beginning to go after impeachment platform.
Yeah, there are a number of Democrats who are talking about impeaching Trump. But
he said he's going to do it on his own.
Yeah, well, that's the only way he can do it.
Yeah, he said from the ground up this time, not from the top down.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you noticed the presidential seal that was behind Trump when he was speaking to Davos. He changed the direction of the eagle.
Really?
It's facing the arrows now and not the olive branches.
Really?
And that hasn't been done since what, the 1940s?
I didn't even know. Is there a story there, a history behind that?
I think the last time it was facing that way was 1947.
Wow. Well, let me look that up, Susan. That's fascinating. I had no idea. Susan, thank you for that.
You can see a picture of it online.
Yeah, I'll check it out. I'll look it up. Susan, thank you so much for the call. Carol in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Hey, Carol, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Good to talk to you again. Hey, the first thing I wanted to tell everybody out there is when you try and call your state representative, you'll see on all their home offices, a good portion of them have no phone numbers.
Yikes.
So you can't even call them, okay? And we are, the WhiteHouse.gov number has already been taken down on the first day. And when you call the D.C. office, you get somebody mentioned this a couple of days ago, you get a Medicare Advantage. Hey, it goes somewhere, special. You got a special today. Medicare Advantage.
Wow.
It comes on. Yeah. So when people tweeted about not paying the taxes, I understand her frustration because you can't even contact these people now, state offices or home offices. They've taken down the numbers because they don't want anybody calling and finding out about what's going on. So that's the first thing. The other thing I was going to say is people is that they're being propped up by the billionaires. So you can do this right from your home. You know, keep your old iPhone. You don't need to buy a new one. That's supporting Cook. He was there behind from Apple. And then get off Facebook. Don't get on there. Instagram, all those are Zuckerberg. So you could help with that way. Stay off those things owned by these billionaires. Amazon, try and buy. Bezos in his pocket too. Buy stuff from your local store. You know, your
Carol,
local
it sounds
store.
like we're in our break. I got to run. Thank you.
Pandemics, hurricanes, freezes to give essential supplies. And 3, being an involved and supportive neighbor to the hundreds of unique communities it serves.
We say fight back!
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Unsettling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the doctrine of discovery by Mark Charles and Soon Chan Ra. This is from chapter 1. You cannot discover lands that are already inhabited. I, Mark, said this almost under my breath as I walked past a line of men dressed as Spanish sailors from the 1490s. I was in front of Union Station in Washington, D.C., near the massive statue of Christopher Columbus overlooking the United States Capitol. Every Columbus Day, there's an official ceremony in this plaza honoring Columbus as the discoverer of America. I had stumbled upon this ceremony by accident the year prior. There were a few non-natives holding signs and protesting the ceremony, but nothing very disruptive. I went back the following year primarily out of curiosity. I wasn't intending to protest, nor did I want to make a scene. As I walked up behind the statue and approached the group of men dressed as Spanish sailors, the words just came out of my mouth. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I walked further down the line, I said it again, this time a little louder. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I continued walking, I came to the front of the line where a group of men dressed in suits were standing. I repeated myself, making sure they could hear me. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. Suck it up, was the reply I heard as I kept walking. By this time, I'd walked around the statue and reached the front where a small stage had been erected and chairs set up for people to watch the ceremony. It hadn't started yet, but more than half the audience was seated waiting for it to begin. So I stopped near the center, turned toward the crowd, and in a calm but loud voice, I said to the people, you cannot discover lands already inhabited. That process is known as stealing, conquering, or colonizing. The fact that America calls what Columbus did discovery reveals the implicit racial bias of the country, that Native Americans are not fully human. Quickly, one of the white men dressed in a suit walked over and interrupted me. You are not welcome here, he said as he grabbed my arm and began walking me away. I attempted to explain the inappropriateness of both celebrating this holiday as well as hosting this ceremony, but instead of engaging in conversation, he threatened me with arrest and escorted me from the area. As I walked away from the gathering, I was amused at his words and the irony of their context. A white man participating in a public ceremony honoring Christopher Columbus as the discoverer of America, telling a native man he was not welcome in that space. How did a flawed assumption about the place of the indigenous population in U.S. society become normative? How are assumptions so deeply ingrained in the American psyche and imagination that dysfunctional and oppressive actions emerge? How did a dysfunctional idea and worldview form that allows for the displacement of native bodies? One of the explanations for the formation of this dysfunctional worldview is the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery is a set of legal principles that govern the European colonizing powers, particularly during the administration of indigenous land, regarding the administration. It is the primary legal precedent that still controls native affairs and rights, and international law formulated in the 15th and 16th centuries. From a theological perspective, the legal and political role of the doctrine of discovery is rooted in a dysfunctional theological imagination that shaped the European colonial settler worldview. The doctrine emerged from a series of 15th century papal bulls, which are official decrees by the Pope that carry the full weight of his ecclesiastical office. On June 18, 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bull Dum Diversus, which initiated the first set of documents that would compose the doctrine of discovery. The official decree of the Pope granted permission to King Alfonso V of Portugal, quote, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens, Muslims, and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever, held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his or their use and profit. End of quote from Pope Nicholas's papal bull of 1452. Doomed verses would identify the Saracens, a common term for Muslims at the time, and pagans, essentially identifying any non-Christians as others, as those who could be targeted for, quote, perpetual slavery. The papal bull intentionally used language that identified those outside the European Christian world and enforced the Western theological imagination of non-Europeans as other. The Portuguese took these ecclesiastical statements to heart and perpetrated the slave trade from the African continent to the European and the American continents. As a Christian ruler, the King of Portugal would have power endowed from the church to take possession of the other as slave labor from the continent of Africa. The pagan African body was just another commodity to be taken for the pleasure and profit of the European Christian body, the one made most fully in the image of God. In the January of 1454, Pope Nicholas authored another bull. The book is Unsettling Truths by Charles and Ra.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to Hour 3 of the Thom Hartmann Program. New Trump official declared competent white men must be in charge. Yeah. Darren Beattie is, Trump's State Department is hiring his first-term speechwriter, a guy by the name of Darren Beattie, for a top job just 15 weeks. This is by Tommy Christopher, by the way, over at Mediaite. Just 15 weeks after he submitted that, quote, competent white men must be in charge in a tweet. Semaphore broke the news that Marco Rubio is going to appoint him as Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy. Yeah. He was fired from the last Trump administration for speaking to a conference of white nationalists. Some weeks ago, apparently, he wrote, quote, competent white men must be in charge if you want things to work. Unfortunately, our entire national ideology is predicated on coddling the feelings of women and minorities and demoralizing competent white men. I'm telling you, these people know what they're doing. They are trying to make America white again. They're trying to bring America back to where only white men are in charge. And this is why a majority of white men and a majority of white women voted for Donald Trump in the last election. It's real simple. It's about race. It's about power. Darby Saxby, a professor of psychology at the University of Southern California, shared a leaked list of words. Now, this is the National Science Foundation. And I subscribe to Nature, and I'm a member of the AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And so I get these, emails, and the scientific community is just hysterical right now. And here's why. If you have submitted an application for funding for research that you're doing, and it has words in it like systemic or women, I'll give you the whole list.
And this Darby Saxby, he writes, this is a crisis for science. These keywords could show up in the text of any grant involving human participants. If you're going to study men and women, you get flagged. If you say you're going to control for socioeconomic status, which is a totally standard practice, you get flagged. Disability, flagged. The word systemic is on the banned list. So if I study systemic inflammation and health, I get flagged. If I study political science, flagged. If I study trauma, flagged. And so here's this list, and I'm only going to share a little bit of it with you. Advocacy, barriers, biased, Black and Latinx, community diversity, cultural differences, culturally responsive, disabilities, disability, discrimination, diverse backgrounds, diversity, diversity and inclusion, diversity, equity, equality, equitable, ethnicity, female. If the word female is in your grant application, you don't get funded. Gender. If hate speech is in your application, you don't get funded because, of course, you know, the Trump administration is just down with hate speech. Fine thing. Hispanic, implicit bias, inclusion, indigenous, inequality, LGBT, marginalized, minorities, multicultural, prejudice, race, ethnicity, racial diversity, racial inequality, racial justice, racism. If you're studying racism, your grant just got zeroed out. Sexual preferences, social justice, status, trauma, underserved, underrepresented, undervalued, victim, women. I mean, this is crazy. And they sent out this whole decision tree about, you know, you look for these words. If you find these words, boom, you bounce them. Meanwhile, federal health workers are terrified after this website, it's called the DEI Watch List, is publishing the names and pictures and personal information of federal employees who are involved in the health field. You know, people who go out and do vaccinations, or people who are, working for the VA or whatever. I mean, it's just, and interestingly, they call it the DEI Watch List. Interestingly, almost all of the names and pictures on this website are of Black people. Once again, it's the racism, stupid. Offenses include working on DEI initiatives, donating to Democrats, or using pronouns in their bios. A government worker said the website is being circulated among multiple private group chats of federal health workers across agencies, as well as through social media links. People are freaked out. They're terrified. The headline over these pictures of these mostly Black people on this DEI watch list of the federal employees, the headline used to say targets. They changed that yesterday when it got publicized to say dossiers. A person who isn't on the list but works at a federal health agency called the website psychological warfare. The link, this person said, is being circulated in their private group of federal health workers, causing some to freak out, you think. A note at the bottom of the website says, a project of the American Accountability Foundation. This is one of the so-called conservative watchdog groups. This article over at NBC News notes, quote, it's not the first time the group has created such a list. In December, it sent Pete Hegseth, then the nominee for Defense Secretary, a list of names and people in the military whom it deemed too focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, the New York Post reported at the time. Meanwhile, the CIA has sent a buyout offer to its entire workforce. Work for the CIA? Hey, how'd you like to quit your job? Russia would love it. Vladimir Putin would be so happy if good people in the CIA resigned their jobs. I mean, he's got to be thrilled with everything that Musk is doing and that Trump is doing right now. You know, putting a target on our backs around Gaza, taking lifting the burden from Netanyahu's shoulders. That's hurting America. Putin and Xi, President Xi of China, they have to be just giggling at all the ways that Donald Trump is destroying America. The new CIA director, John Ratcliffe, decided he also wants the CIA to be involved in this whole thing that Musk is doing. And over at Lever News today, I believe it's Lever News, it might be Judd Legum's website. What's Judd's website? Anyway, there's a whole breakdown of the offer, this 8-month offer, and apparently what it says, while people think that, and in fact the email said you can take a vacation for the next 8 months and still get paid, the actual fine print of the article or of the offer says, no, you have to work until the very last day. So, oh yeah, popular.info. That's Judd's website. So wild stuff here, just absolutely wild stuff here. So what's on your mind? Let's pick up your calls here. Johan in Los Angeles. Hey, Johan, what's up?
I saw President Trump on White House desk with his pen, and he was worried about country of Israel is too small, and that didn't sit well with him.
Did he say that? Israel's too small?
Yeah, he actually said was that's not good.
Yeah,
so
they're preparing to annex the West
war
Bank.
with Israel.
I think that what you're going to see next, now that Netanyahu has come over to the United States and Trump has basically said, for the next 4 years, you get whatever you want and we'll let the Arab world hate us instead of you. I'm predicting that the next thing you're going to see is a wholesale annexation of the West Bank. Netanyahu has destroyed Gaza. Next up is the West Bank, the Palestinian communities there. And I don't know how he's going to do it, but I would bet just about anything that within the next year or two, you're going to see, and probably sooner, you're going to see major Israeli aggressive activity against Arabs on the West Bank. Johan, thank you for the call. It's 15 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay tuned. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where despair is not an option. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back with your calls. And welcome back. And let's see who's on hold here. John in Westchester, New York. Hey, John, what's up?
Hey, happy hump day, Tom.
Yeah, back at you, John. What's on your mind?
Yeah, all right. The woman, one of the previous callers talked about withholding taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Try to defund Trump. Now, what would happen if all of us didn't pay on tax day?
It's a huge if, John. That's the problem.
That would be tremendous.
Well, it's a huge if. I remember back in the 60s when the tax protesters were right-wingers. And in fact, some of them got arrested while I was doing the news at WITL. The police and the, I don't know who, FBI or a federal officer and a local cop stopped by and asked us not to publicize it because they didn't want protests. But, they were busting a whole house full of these guys down the street for not paying their taxes.
But there's more of us than they are of them.
There are, but we're not organized. This is not France, where 90% of people are in a union and people can just send out a mass email to everybody and say, do this. We're scattered all over the place, especially on the left.
The first 3 weeks of Trump's presidency, I think, has galvanized a lot of people who weren't. You give it another 3 months, we might be stepping up.
Yeah, I think people are waking the hell up. The question is, will it be too late?
Well, it would be a message that if enough of us did it, it would be a definite message to them.
Yeah, there you go. I get it, John. I get it. I can't suggest to people that they literally take their lives in their hands or risk prison or huge fines to make a political statement. But I get what you're saying. Thank you for the call. Cassandra in East Troy, Wisconsin. Hey, Cassandra, what's up?
Hi. Yeah, thank you for a great show today, Tom. There's another potential consequence to this massive data breach. And I believe that Greg Palast referred to some of this recently. I think it should be emphasized. Now that Elon Musk and his kid lackeys have hooked up his server for all our data information at the U.S. Treasury, downloading every citizen's personal data, including the name, social security numbers, birth dates, birthplaces, current home
We don't
addresses.
know that they've done that, but it's reasonable to assume that they would, I think.
Okay, well, I did see that reported. And telephone numbers, email addresses, and bank account information.
Right.
His system can, using a program or AI, go in and obtain the necessary ID to register or purge any U.S. voter, leading to millions of compromised votes in the midterms in 2026 and the general election in 2028.
Oh, wow.
So I'm just saying this as a warning because we tend to react after the fact instead of planning in advance.
Right. Well, and this goes back to Trump thanking Elon Musk for helping out with those vote counting computers in Pennsylvania.
Yes, exactly. And he also said we'd never have to vote again. Yeah. And, Putin wins by nearly 90% of the vote. So this can only be accomplished with massive data breach. And now it's happening.
Wow. That hadn't even occurred to me. Yeah, the dimensions of this thing are bigger than anything I ever thought that I would see in my lifetime. We've been hearing right-wingers yell about this for years. But Cassandra, thank you so much for the call and spot on.
Yep.
Thank
All
you.
right.
19 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls on the other side of this break. We'll be back in just a minute. Stay tuned. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com.
Once upon a time they owned the stage. FDR's fireside chats lit the page. JFK smiled, he knew the score. His charm and vision opened the door. But the years rolled on and the game has changed. Media's a weapon, the rules rearranged. Trump's on TikTok, they're stuck in the past. Schumer's speeches, a snooze that won't last. The Democrats' fatal flaw, they don't see the writing on the wall. The battle's online where the cliques all roar, but they fight like it's still 64.
21 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here, Russell in Cocoa, Florida. Hey, Russell, what's up?
Yay, Tom. Can you hear me?
Just fine, Russell.
All right, that's great. All right, I want to tell you why I call. A couple of reasons. I'm an old guy. I'm a retired constitutional and municipal lawyer from the big Northeast, where we knew how to do it. And I've watched everything go to hell since Reagan. And everything we do is too little, too late. And it, Merrick Garland, whatever.
Yeah.
It's always not enough. Now, what we have now, and it just outraged me a week ago when I first heard it, is we now have goons breaking into government buildings to steal information and throw out the employees. Now, where have we almost seen that before? The answer is Watergate. Okay? In Watergate, the president wanted the plumbers to go into these places, steal information for him, doctors' offices, hotels, whatever, DNC headquarters, steal this information and improve his position, in the next election.
He also had the IRS go after his enemies.
Right. In other words, he had already mobilized certain sections of the government and plenty of goons to work on his behalf. What happened at Watergate? The night watchman caught these people inside the building, and he, together with the DNC, went to who? The Washington, D.C. police, and said, we have uninvited, unpermitted trespassers inside our building. We want to file criminal charges, and we want you to arrest them. okay? And it didn't matter that they were there on behalf of the president, although they wouldn't admit that at first. But when they were bailed out 3 or 4 days later by the White House, it was obvious what was going on. But the point is this. We've reached the point now where they are actually inside our government, dismantling its agencies, and ruining our lives, stealing our information and everything else. Let the supervisors of these agencies, if they're in a position where Trump hasn't replaced them yet, like the lady at DEA, whatever, let them and their 5 highest security people who haven't been replaced yet, let them go to the D.C. nearest police headquarters, walk in, and swear out criminal complaints against these people. Now, a month ago, Biden should have deported Musk. Okay, I live right under his rockets here in Central Florida, and he is ruining lives to an extent you can't even believe. But I'm not here to pick on him per se. What I am saying is it's time to draw a line in the sand. If you can't get the D.C. police to support their colleagues and friends who were beaten on January 6th, then you're not going to be able to get anybody in America to ever support us again. Arrest these 3 Nazi punks that were inside that building, stealing all our information. If you or I went in there, we'd be arrested. They'd throw away the
D.C.
key.
police don't have authority over federal property.
They were the ones that were called and made the arrest.
Well, maybe outside. If it was on the street outside, yes. But inside the building, it would have to be the FBI. It would have to be the Department of Justice. Right. And I guarantee you, Pam Bondi is not going to arrest any Republicans. It ain't going to happen. Or any Musk.
That's right. That's why I'm not asking her to do anything. I'm asking the local police. Those people are not in that building anymore. They're back home, or they're at NOAA, or they're at some other building.
Russell, I get what you're saying, and I agree with your sentiment and your outrage. I'm telling you, it's, well, I shouldn't even say it's not going to happen. I don't want to sound defeatist, but I just don't see how that legally happens. Russell, thanks for the call. Eric in Charleston, South Carolina. Hey, Eric, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, Tom, I'm calling because I'm in one of these red states, right?
Yeah.
And I know in these red states that we do have Democrats in every red state who are serving in Washington right now. Well, these Democrats got to get off their rum, go back to these red states, and they got to go in each county, even the counties that didn't vote for them, and they got to start letting the people know, because a lot of people don't know that they're going to lose jobs. Like for example, this lady in Kentucky, she didn't know that when they got the education department, that she would be losing her job.
Well, you've got Head Start programs all around the country right now that seem to be shutting down as a result of
Well, these people don't know that. That's why the Democrats, because the people only, the Republican congressmen only fear 2 people, Trump and the people. And the Democrats got to go to the people in their states and got to start letting the people in their states know how these programs are going to affect them physically. And then they'll start calling their Republican representatives, and that's when you'll see a change. But the Democrats, they got to leave Washington. They got to go back to their states and do a little footwork. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Eric, and you know, this is one of the things that people could be suggesting to their elected officials is, you know, come back and do a town hall. Although, you know, a lot of them are in D.C. right now, but we do need to be raising hell. We'll be back with more of your calls on the other side of the break. Stay tuned. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, speaking the truths that Elon Musk would really rather you didn't know all about. I'll be right back with you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be right back with your calls. Stay tuned. We're reading today from a book by David Sanger, the Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times national security reporter. The title of the book is The Perfect Weapon: War, Sabotage, and Fear in the cyber age. We're reading from the preface. A year into Donald J. Trump's presidency, his defense secretary, Jim Mattis, sent the new commander-in-chief a startling recommendation. With nations around the world threatening to use cyber weapons to bring down America's power grids, cell phone networks, and water supplies, Trump should declare that he's ready to take extraordinary steps to protect the country. If any nation hit America's critical infrastructure with a devastating strike, even a non-nuclear one, it should be forewarned that the United States might reach for a nuclear weapon in response. Like most things in Washington, the recommendation leaked immediately. Excuse me. Many declared it a crazy idea and wild overkill. While nations had turned their cyber weapons against each other dozens of times in recent years, no attack had yet proven to cost a human life, at least directly. Not the American attacks on Iran's and North Korea's weapon programs, not the North Korean attacks on American banks, a famed Hollywood studio, and the British healthcare system, not the Russian attacks in Ukraine, Europe, and then at the core of American democracy. That streak of luck was certain to end soon, but why should Donald Trump or any of his successors take the huge risk of escalating a cyber war by going nuclear? The Pentagon's recommendation, it turned out, was the prelude to other proposals delivered to a president who values toughness and America first to use the nation's powerful cyber weapons far more aggressively. But it was also a reminder of how quickly the fear of devastating cyber attacks has moved from the stuff of science fiction and die-hard movies to the center of American defense strategy. Just over a decade before, in 2007, cyber attacks were missing entirely from the global threat assessment that intelligence agencies prepare each year for Congress. Terrorism topped that list, along with other post-9/11 concerns. Now that hierarchy has been reversed. For several years, a variety of cyber threats, ranging from a paralyzing strike on the nation's cities to a sophisticated effort to undercut public confidence in its institutions, has appeared as the nation's #1 threat on the list. Not since the Soviets tested the bomb in 1949 had the perception of threats facing the nation been revised so quickly. Yet Mattis, who had risen to 4-star status in a career focused in the Middle East, feared that the 2 decades spent chasing al-Qaeda and ISIS around the globe had distracted America from its most potent challenges. Great power competition, not terrorism, is now the primary focus of U.S. national security, he said in early 2018. America's, quote, competitive edge has eroded in every domain of warfare, including the newest one, cyberspace. The nuclear strategy he handed Trump gave voice to an inchoate fear among many in the Pentagon that cyber attacks posed a threat unlike any other, one that we had completely failed to deter. The irony is that the United States remains the world's stealthiest, most skillful cyber power, as the Iranians discovered when their centrifuges spun out of control, and the North Koreans suspected as their missiles fell out of the sky. But the gap is closing. Cyber weapons are so cheap to develop and so easy to hide that they've proven irresistible. And American officials are discovering that in a world in which almost everything is connected, phones, cars, electrical grids, and satellites, everything can be disrupted, if not destroyed. For several years, the thinking inside the Pentagon was that only nations with nuclear weapons could threaten America's existence. Now that assumption is in doubt. In almost every classified Pentagon scenario for how a future confrontation with Russia and China, or even Iran and North Korea might play out, the adversary's first strike against the United States would include a cyber barrage aimed at civilians. It would fry power grids, stop trains, silence cell phones, and overwhelm the internet. In the worst-case scenarios, food and water would begin to run out. Hospitals would turn people away. Separated from their electronics and thus their connections, Americans would panic and turn against one another. The Pentagon is now planning for this scenario because it knows many of its own war plans open with similarly paralyzing cyber attacks against our adversaries, reflecting new strategies to try to win wars before a shot is fired. Glimpses of what this would look like have leaked out in recent years, thanks partly to Edward J. Snowden, partly because of a mysterious group called the Shadow Brokers, suspected of close links to Russian intelligence, obtained terabytes of data containing many of the tools that the National Security Agency used to breach foreign computer networks. It didn't take long for some of those stolen cyber weapons to be shot back at America and its allies in attacks whose bizarre-sounding names, like WannaCry, suddenly appeared in the headlines every week. Yet the secrecy surrounding these programs obscures most public debate about the wisdom of using them or the risks inherent in losing control of them. The government's silence about America's new arsenal and its implications poses a sharp contrast to the first decades of the nuclear era. The horrific scenes of destruction at Hiroshima and Nagasaki not only seared the national psyche, but made America's destructive capabilities, and soon Russia's and China's, obvious and undeniable. Yet even while the government kept the details classified, how to build atomic weapons, where they are stored, and who has the authority to order their launch, America engaged in a decades-long political debate about when to threaten to use the bomb and whether to ban it. The book, The Perfect Weapon by David E. Sanger.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. From Los Angeles to Columbia, South Carolina, from Birmingham, Alabama to Baltimore, universal basic income programs are chalking up proof after proof of their viability. Basically just giving people, low-income people, poor people, somewhere between $500 and $1,500 a month, no strings attached, is lifting people out of poverty, getting them back on track, getting them into solid middle-class jobs, helping their children tremendously. This works. Now, we don't have to do UBI in the United States. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have a national health care program. Health expenses are whacking a lot of low-income people. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have free college education. Education expenses are whacking people. There's a lot we could do. We can subsidize housing. We can subsidize food. We do that with food stamps. We could expand it. There's a lot we could do to benefit from this. There's a whole report about that over at hartmanreport.com. Check it out.
A handshake in the shadows, a deal beneath the storm. Promises of progress, but the fire starts to form. They smile with sharp intentions, their words a deadly game. And every inch you give them, they set your soul aflame. They'll dress up lies as compromise, but the truth is razor thin. You think you've won a battle, but the war is where they begin. Evil doesn't negotiate, it devours, it consumes. It's the shadow in the doorway, the smoke that chokes the room. You can't tame a beast that feeds on fear and power. Evil doesn't compromise, it devours.
Welcome back. 36 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Jenny in Moberly, Missouri. Hey, Jenny, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I have some ideas on how to get Republican legislature people's attention.
Okay.
Because it seems that they're not listening to any of us, and even some are turning off their phone lines. And they're so afraid of the wrong people right now. What they need to be aware of is that the vast majority of citizens are getting increasingly mobilized and unhappy with what they're doing. And so my idea is to go local and go specific. And as money talks, we can find out who their major local supporters are and boycott their businesses by local ad time to get out just any sort of truth, bypassing the major media. And then, since it seems that perhaps the courts are an only option, start filing massive lawsuits in every district on every single issue to every single representative for, I don't know, malfeasance, anything. It's just to get their attention so that they can't ignore it and they know how big the backlash is getting.
Yeah, I don't think most people know how to do, how to file lawsuits and things like that. And I'm guessing that if you were to buy an ad on any local media trashing another business, they would not.
It's an idea to get out there. It's the whole naysayer and it can't be done thing is not things.
I would say look at their local offices.
If it's a seed of an idea that somebody take in and want to mobilize, but we're focusing too much on the major players.
Yeah.
But every single one of these people has something to do.
I get that, and your local representatives as well, absolutely. But with the national ones, if you can't get through to their federal offices, try their local offices, their in-district offices, and but yeah, keep.
They're not going to pay attention. But,
well, I think they will. I think the key is not to call up like you're some kind of outraged lefty. The key is to call up and essentially present yourself in a way that could be interpreted as being a supporter of that member of Congress or senator, but that you think that this has gone too far, or there's something wrong, or this is not truly a conservative principle. In fact, these conservative principles are you don't break things, those kind of things. Those would be the messages that I would convey to Republicans.
And part of the problem is that a lot of the local people won't hear any of the actual happenings. And these might be ways, especially if you get in contact with local pantries and federally supported organizations that rely on funds and have huge of conservatives that rely on them just to help get the word out on a local level that doesn't require
I got it.
Social media, which is starting to be censored too.
No, social media has been massively censored. It's just insane. Jenny, thank you for the call. Jeff in Seattle. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I just wanted to make a couple of comments, and I'll do it real quick. First of all, I have heard a story about the Eagle changing direction.
Yeah, I looked it up. It was done. And Trump spoke at a Turning Point USA conference, and some young geek edited the Eagle for when he came out, and he got in trouble and he got fired for it.
Okay, because the story I heard was that if it faces the arrows, it's a time of war. If it faces
Harry
the
Truman
olive branches,
officially changed it to face the olive branch in 1947. It's still there.
Permanently?
It's still that way.
Okay. And second of all, about this woman who said that they're taking down, they're removing numbers from the internet for your local representatives. Might I suggest contacting your local League of Women Voters? Here in King County, they put out a pamphlet every year.
Yeah.
Listing your representatives.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great idea, Jeff. And for that matter, if you're female, although I think the League accepts male members, join. Join the League of Women Voters. They do incredible work. Jeff, thank you for that. That was great. Lori in Ocala, Florida. Hey, Lori, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I think I got wind a while ago that Musk has gotten into our tax system, and our hard-earned money has already been looted by the billionaires.
I don't know that anything's been looted, but he's certainly got his...
They removed the Treasury's free tax preparation program. So
yeah, he did. He said he did that on X, in a tweet on X.
And that's taking our money. Okay, that's adding to our burden. So I think that it's become apparent the billionaires are working the government by buying the politicians to get their tax credits.
Yeah.
We need to turn this over and start telling everybody that they are indeed stealing from us, stealing from hardworking Americans. We're not getting the grocery prices down, and we need to have trickle up.
Yeah.
By that I mean that we need to have the least, the people that make the least start getting lower taxes, and then after everyone that's gotten up to the 2 or 3 million point, that's when we can start increasing taxes for the millionaire. But we have to turn it around now so that if we told everybody this, if everybody understood what they're trying to do, because I really don't think a lot of Republicans understand what the goal is.
Oh, they know exactly what they're doing. They're trying to cut enough government funding that they can pass a tax cut without increasing the deficit.
The government people. I mean, not the Republican people, the people in our country. The Republican voters don't really understand that they're getting ripped off. So
no, they don't. They never have, because they live in this information bubble.
Right, but my bottom line is let's start by saying, hey, they broke into our tax system. They want to get tax credits, and they're trying to increase our taxes. They have already taken away our free tax preparation program, and that's just the very beginning. And we really need to push that it's our turn. It's trickle up time.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm with you, Lori. I get it. I'm with you. Thank you very much. Jeremiah in Alexandria, Virginia. Hey, Jeremiah, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Good to hear you. Good to see you again. So, some of these it made me call in because somebody you were talking to earlier, and I'm seeing this a lot where people are just very, almost flabbergasted at what is the point of the tariffs, about bringing the money in and so forth. And where I think they're probably going with this is I think Trump is trying to circumvent the tax system without actually going through Congress to do it. And what I mean by that is I remember, before a lot of the Republican, oligarch-backed people, they were trying to get a national sales tax through, which, of course, that would never go through because that overwhelmingly hurts the bottom 99%, which spend, overwhelmingly the bigger portion of their income than, say, the top 1%, which, is more of.
That's why we have no sales tax at all here in Oregon.
Yeah, so but if you don't call it a sales tax and you call it a tariff, you can basically backdoor and circumvent the tax without having to go through the rigmarole.
There you go,
Congress.
Jeremiah. There
And
you go.
It also made me think of the whole no tax on tips thing, and darn well it wasn't for servers and bartenders.
No,
it's about this,
it's so hedge fund managers can take a $10,000 a year salary and a $2 billion a year tip. No, I get it, Jeremiah.
They change commission to tip, and then all of a sudden, done deal.
Yeah, no, a great suggestion that, or meme, I guess, that with the tariffs, what they're trying to do is institute a national sales tax. That's brilliant. Jeremiah, thank you for the call. It's coming up on 45 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's the place where we dare to ask, is Walmart a person? And we dare to say, God, give me a break. The Supreme Court got that one wrong. And welcome back. Tom in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. I do have a question. I really haven't heard much of this on the media regarding the sovereign wealth fund that Trump signed, because it seems to me that this is just going to be a way of funneling money from the Treasury into Trump's hands, who will end up continuing to bypass Congress. Congress will end up being irrelevant. Am I off base on this? I haven't really heard anybody talking
I think
about
you nailed it, Tom. I think he's trying to create a slush fund for himself. The only countries that have sovereign wealth funds are the countries that actually have sovereign wealth, that have surpluses. Norway has a $1 trillion surplus as a result of all the oil they've sold from the North Shore. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates. I mean, those wealth funds invested in Jared Kushner, for example, or at least the Saudi one did. I think that Trump is trying to create a slush fund with our taxpayer dollars that he can spend on the things that he thinks are important or that he wants to spend it on. And I'm guessing that will be things that somehow confer some sort of profit to him.
Well, this actually frightens me a lot more than anything, because it just seems to me that he's going to end up funding just about everything over to him somehow, considering the way they've started out with all of this, everything that they're doing right now.
Not impossible.
And that's why I think that it's just going to, I don't even know what Congress will do. They won't do anything right now. I mean, I've been hearing.
No, Congress, this is the Treasury Secretary has either 60 or 90 days to come up with a plan and submit it to the White House. So that's where they're at on this thing. But Trump, I think the other day, mentioned something like using it to rebuild Gaza. I mean, he's just got all these wacky ideas that, and then hiring, of course, his son-in-law to manage the project. That's the kind of thing that I would see happening. Tom, brilliant. Thank you for the call. Liz in Doña Ana County, New Mexico. Hey, Liz, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I wanted to let you know that I just saw something that really scared me. I went to log on to my Social Security account, and they wanted me to redo my login so that I went through something called login.gov.
Right.
And that would get me into any and all government agencies that I might need. But they want all kinds of information. They want your Social Security number. They want a photograph of your driver's license. Yeah. They want your home address. I mean, and
this stuff is not new.
I don't mind giving that out occasionally to, something like Social Security. But I want to be the one that picks where it goes. And it just really felt like I was handing all my information to Elon Musk and his cronies.
Yeah, well, ultimately
so
you might have been. You don't need to use login.gov. You can log in directly to ssa.gov. And, and if you don't have a password and an account there, you can just do it with SSA. But login.gov has been around for years. That's not something.
Oh, it has been around for a long time?
Yes, yeah, this is not something new. And you can still, I just logged on to my Social Security account yesterday because somebody called and said, it's gone screwy. And I was able to verify that it hasn't, at least for me. So you can still log on independently or individually as, just using email and a password. Liz, I got to run, but thanks for the call. It's 49 and a half minutes past the hour. I'll be right back with you in 60 seconds. Stay tuned. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Corporate raiders, when they acquire a company, basically strip it down. They take everything of value out of it, put it in their own pockets, leave just a husk of a company. I watched, Bain Capital do this with Clear Channel. In fact, they just ran it into bankruptcy, and they run off with all the cash. Well, that's what Donald Trump is doing to America right now. He's basically behaving like a corporate raider, taking, all the assets of this company and handing as many of them as possible off to billionaires and shutting down programs that benefit average working class people. This is, an all billionaire cabinet or largely billionaire cabinet with a billionaire president, and they're dancing to the tune of the billionaires. It shouldn't surprise us, I suppose, but there's a whole article about it over in my Daily Take entitled Trump's Hostile Takeover of America, the Corporate Raiders' Final Heist, over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
In the heart of our hometown, where the streets are bustling around, we gather neath the morning sun. Together we can get things done. Every voice, every hand, together we can make a stand. Tag your interest, join the fight.
Welcome back. 51 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Fred in Exeter, New Hampshire. Hey, Fred, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Well, I'm seething, to say the least, especially after Trump and Netanyahu's press conference, if you want to call it that. But what I want to know is, why is Merrick Garland getting a free pass? This guy has stalled for 2 years. And because of him, we have a convicted felon, a rapist, a mentally ill, malignant narcissist as president. This guy's stupid as a rock. His only talent is lying and grifting. And I'm not so sure if Merrick Garland was incompetent, timid, or he was part of this collusion. What are your thoughts on this?
I think incompetent/timid is almost certainly, what happened. He was trying very, very hard not to politicize the Department of Justice because Trump had so egregiously politicized it. And, timid is probably the absolute best word. And I have been, on him, complaining about him for 4 years now, to the point that, a couple of months ago, at the big convention, or I guess it was now a year ago. Wasn't it? No, it was August, yeah, not last summer. that the woman who writes the Mueller, She Wrote newsletter came up to me and said, "You're wrong about Merrick Garland. He's a good guy." I'm like, I don't think so. So, you know, I've got people giving me crap about it, Fred. That's how long I've been on this beat. But I agree with you.
What smells to me is that he was originally nominated for the Supreme Court as a nominee that the Republicans would vote for.
That's correct.
And
it was Orrin Hatch's suggestion to Barack Obama that if you nominate this guy, I can get him through. And then, of course, Orrin Hatch had lied to Obama, and Mitch McConnell stole the seat. So, Fred, I got to run, but
we all
thank
know
you.
the character.
Yeah, there
we
you
all
go.
know the character of Orrin Hatch.
The late Orrin Hatch now. But yes, I agree. Thank you, Fred. Mark in Jamesville, Wisconsin. Hey, Mark, what's up? Is that Janesville with an N? Yeah, it is. Okay.
Jan, yep. Yeah. Just some 35 miles south of Madison.
Yep.
Tom, when you had Congressman Pocan on, I'm not in his district. I'm in with it where Ryan used to be style now. My problem is with they just stink at messaging our politicians.
Yeah.
I mean, the only ones that seem to really come out, I hear Bernie, AOC, I hear Elizabeth Warren, but I mean, Schumer's sitting there with the glasses hanging off of his nose. I guess we just, we got to primary them all. I mean, I understand they can't get on many of these news stations, but I mean, why aren't they sending out flyers? All this stuff that Trump disavowed 2025, I mean, he's implementing.
Yeah.
The oligarchy, the only people that talked about that in the last 10 years were you and Bernie.
Yeah.
And a little bit of Jimmy Carter. It's just like a little too late. The very last day going out, Biden talks about oligarchy. Now look where we're at.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally get it, Mark, and I agree with your sentiment, and I want the Democrats to take names and and be more aggressive.
You just said the word timid. That's what our side is, timid.
I know, and I don't like it.
I don't get it. I mean, why aren't they putting flyers out?
I think some of them are starting to wake up, but most of them are scared to death that if they take a strong stand, that Elon Musk will fund a primary against them, and it'll be the end of their careers. It's the same fear that all these Republican senators had who just voted for Bob Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard, and they're going to vote now for Tulsi Gabbard, and they just voted them out of committee, and Kash Patel. So that's what's going on, Mark. Mark, thanks for the call. Mike in Chicago. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I've been a long-time listener to pieces and snippets of your show on YouTube, and I've recently started following it for the full thing.
Well, thank you.
I got a lot of respect for your intelligence and your ethic. I sit here and I'm listening to this. I retired last summer after 30-something years in the trades. And I'm watching my retirement swirling the drain.
Yeah.
It is what it is. There's a lot of, clutching of pearls going on. Mm-hmm. Big incohesiveness. And I understand this is early at this point to expect that things would be pieced together. What we need is people, we need organizations to stand up and follow, and someone to follow. I've taken your advice and looked at Progressive Democrats and signed up for their newsletter and MoveOn.org and looking. I've never been on Substack until recently and looking at Dino Vidala.
Mike,
but there needs to be.
I'm sorry, I'm out of time here, but thank you. I get it, and the Democrats really need to get their act together, and we need to be joining these organizations and raising help. Mike, thanks so much for the call. Thanks for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us. That includes you. So get out there, get active, tag You're It. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the folks around you. Stay safe, and I'll catch up with you tomorrow. Climate change or our economy. Never miss another one again. Plus, labor news, full Monty alerts, conservative alerts, and my personal favorite.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.